Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cyprus, whether you are physically present in the room or you are somewhere in Europe or beyond Europe. Welcome to the Pesticides conference during the Cyprus presidency. Here from the University of Cyprus, we are hosting live the event on preventing pesticide effects on children's health and the environment. This is an event that is co-organized by the Cyprus International Institute for Environmental and Public Health from the Cyprus University of Technology, together with the Pesticide Action Network Europe and the University of Cyprus, the Department of Chemistry. So thank you once again for being with us today. This is a very exciting half-day event. We are very honored to have with us today an excellent panel of speakers trying to cover most, if not all, of the relevant stakeholders, because the topic is historic. Pesticides. Who doesn't know something about pesticides? My grandparents know something about pesticides. My kids know something about pesticides. We know some things about pesticides. The question still remains, though, to what extent we are protected and to what extent we are protecting the environment for the current and the future generations in light of all the developments that are ongoing during the past decades and in light of the ongoing major policy developments at the European Union level, affecting not only the European Union, but also the whole globe, I would say. And because European Union is a leader globally in the topics of food safety, the topics of pesticides research, in the topics of green development, farm-to-fork practices, and farm-to-fork chain practices, I would say, are very important and will continue to be important as we try to optimize the societal challenges that relate to economic development on one hand, sustainable development on the other, public health issues, biodiversity, environment, climate issues, perceptions of the public, perceptions of the industry. So this is a very complex, but that's real life, that's society. And this is why we are here today, because we would like to discuss these issues together with all of our speakers. So once again, I thank you for being with us today, and I'm very excited for the program. So with no further ado, I would like to call on the podium the General Director of the Ministry of Agriculture, Rural Development and Environment of the Republic of Cyprus, Dr. Andreas Grigoriou, Mr. Andreas Grigoriou, who will actually salute the event on behalf of the Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development and Environment. Mr. Grigoriou, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with a great pleasure that I address today's event on behalf of the Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development and Environment, Dr. Maria Panayiotou, who due to prior commitments was unable to attend. I warmly welcome this event organized by the Cyprus International Institute for Environment, the Public Health of the Cyprus University of Technology, in cooperation with the Pesticides Action Network Europe, the Laona Foundation, and Friends of the Earth. The Ministry of Agriculture, Rural Development and Environment recognized the importance of the plant protection products in safeguarding our food security. At the same time, it acknowledges the need to protect human health, whether concerning consumers or users, as well as the environment from the impacts of their use. In this regard, all stakeholders have an essential role to play, particularly professional users of PPPs and agriculture advisors. Ensuring the proper use of plant protection products is a key priority. We provide training to professional users and agriculture advisors, while the existing legislative framework establishes the principle that guarantee the correct application of PPPs with respect for humans, animals, and the environment. However, the practical implementation of this principle is the responsibility of all stakeholders. This must be clearly understood, as PPPs primarily affect the user who comes into direct contact with the formulations, and secondarily, the consumers to whom we must ensure safe food is delivered. Cyprus has adopted a national action plan for the sustainable use of plant protection products, aiming to minimize risk and impacts on human health, animals, and the environment, including but not limited to public information and awareness raising. To support this effort, informational material is produced covering risk to human health and necessary protective measures, particularly for vulnerable groups, risk to the environment, non-target organized flora and fauna, and measures implemented for their protection, risks to animals, symptoms of acute poisoning, and appropriate first aid measures, and the availability of non-chemical alternative solutions. Our policy, however, is not limited to awareness raising and controls. Promoting reduced resilience on plant protection products and expanding the use of alternative plant protection measures remain long-standing priorities of our ministry. These priorities are reinforced through agri-environmental interventions under the Cyprus CAP Strategic Plan 2023-2027, including promotion of organic farming, use of pest-resistant potato varieties, mass trapping of the Mediterranean fruit fly in tree crops, and soil solarization on annual crops. Recognizing the importance of research, the ministry works closely with the scientific community, supporting research initiatives that contribute to safe food production and reducing risk to public health and the environment. During the Cypriot presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2026, our country has an active role in shaping European policies that ensure a high level of protection for public health and the environment while maintaining the sustainability and resilience of the agriculture sector. We are working to promote a modern, science-based and effective legislative framework for plant protection products, focusing on risk reduction, strengthening integrated pest management, and developing safe and sustainable alternatives. Within this framework, discussions on the food and feed omnibus package aim to simplify implementation of the EU regulatory framework and encourage the uptake of innovative, safe, and sustainable solutions across the agri-food chain. The package seeks to reduce administrative burden, improve clarity and coherence of rules, strengthen controls, and enhance traceability and digital tools, while maintaining high standards for public health, food safety, and environmental protection. At the same time, it promotes the wider use of digital tools, enhanced traceability, and improved access for producers to low-risk alternatives, including biopesticides. The Cypriot presidency seeks to ensure that the simplification of the regulatory framework is accompanied by scientific evidence, predictability for economic operators, and sufficient flexibility for member states. In this way, it aims to strengthen the resilience of the agriculture sector, protect natural resources, and safeguard the long-term sustainability of European agri-food production. At the same time, the Council of Ministers recently approved the EU-Mercosur Agreement, a strategic priority that strengthens the European Union's open strategic autonomy and reduces dependence on unstable trading partners. In the negotiations, Cyprus emphasized the need for full compliance of imported products with European Union production, environmental, health, and food safety standards. And this obligation is reflected in the final text. Furthermore, under the Cypriot presidency, the first meeting of European Union agriculture ministers was convent to initiate the establishment of an EU task force on import controls, aiming to strengthen border controls and ensure effective monitoring of import products. Dear friends, safeguarding public health and protecting the environment in the use of plant protection products is a shared responsibility. Success requires cooperation, dialogue, and a common commitment from the state, the scientific community, producers, and society. Guided by science, informed by production experience, and investing in innovation, we can build a modern and sustainable agri-food model for future generations. I wish you every success in your work, and I am confident that your conclusions will contribute meaningfully to our common goal, a modern, competitive, and environmentally responsible agriculture. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. On behalf of the University of Cyprus and the Department of Chemistry, I would like to welcome you here in the UCY Learning Center in this morning session two distinguished guests are going to give us their expert opinion. Dr. Angeliki Lysimachou and Mr. Klaus Bernet from the DG Sante. So without any further delay, I would like to give the speech to Mr. Klaus Berend to provide us with his expert opinion on the pesticides.
Yes, hello and good morning to everybody. I hope you can hear me. And let me first thank the organizers for the invitation to speak at the event today, and apologize also that I couldn't come to Cyprus in person and can do this only remotely due to time constraints above all. But also I have a bit of a cold, so maybe you're all better off that I'm not with you in the room. Can the organizers now project the presentation?
Please give us some time for the presentation.
Yes, okay. Maybe in the meantime, I can already react to some of the statements that Mr. Gregoriou made. He indeed framed very nicely the context of the food and feed simplification proposal by underlining the ambition of having or of reducing administrative burden and making procedures easier and smoother. Yes, thank you. That's the right slide. No, the next one, indeed. The next one. Yes, that's the one. And indeed, this proposal is to be seen in the context of the priorities of the von der Leyen II Commission, which has the overall objective to streamline and further harmonize the EU regulatory framework in general, increase competitiveness and resilience of the EU economy, and in particular also the food and feed system, and to achieve this by simplification, reducing regulatory burden. And there are targets formulated by the Commission that are to be achieved by the end of this mandate. And for the food and feed simplification package, the more specific objectives are indeed to achieve a faster access to the market for innovation, and in particular, Mr. Gregoriou already referred to that, for biocontrol active substances and products as an alternative to chemical substances. Another objective is the lowering administrative burden for economic operators, but also for the public authorities, in particular the authorities in the member states also, and to remove unnecessary complexity in risk management, which is not so much related to the elements of the proposal in relation to pesticides, but other elements. Can I have the next slide, please? So the package comprises proposals that touch on a whole range of legislation. And for the purpose of the conference today, and having seen also the the description of the session that I'm on together with Angeliki, I will focus only on some of the elements related to plant protection products, not even everything, because it would take too long and then the entire session would be gone. But to recall a bit, the package is based on recent evaluations, including the evaluation of the pesticides legislation, so Regulation 1107/2009 and 396/2005, that was published in May 2020. We conducted a public consultation through a so-called call for evidence from mid-September until mid-October, and got more than or almost 6,500 responses, and a good 6,000 of those were from individuals based on a campaign that I think was also initiated by PAN and other NGOs. 107 submissions from NGOs, 318 from associations and companies, 52 from authorities, and 16 from research organizations. In addition, we had further input from sector organizations, industry associations, farmers associations, and also, and that's very important for us, of course, the European Parliament adopted an own initiative report on, in particular, biocontrol and the need to support market access for new biocontrol substances. Member states were also raising repeatedly specific points in the Agri-Fish Council under any other business, mostly pointing to the need for maintaining a sufficient toolbox for farmers to protect their crops, as indeed food security and the capacity for European farmers to produce is an element that has become more important and more prominent today than it was a couple of years ago. Next slide, please. So, as I said, can I have the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. As I said, I will not touch on everything in the simplification package and also not on everything related to plant protection products, but will focus on the topic that is described in the session or for this panel in particular, and that is the unlimited approval or the possibility for unlimited approvals of active substances. But if there are questions or comments on other elements of the proposal, I'm of course happy to react to those as well. So as a reminder, at the moment, the approvals of all active substances are time limited. Renewal is possible if a re-evaluation shows that the approval can be maintained and renewed because the criteria for approval are still met. The reality is, and the periods for approval, you're probably all familiar with, it's initially 10 years and then 15 years after a first renewal, except for substances that are candidates for substitution, and those approved under the derogation possibility of Article 4.7, where the periods are shorter. The reality is, however, that practically all renewal procedures are delayed and actually significantly delayed. Of the about 200 renewal procedures that are ongoing at the moment, and all together we have a bit more than 400 active substances approved in the EU, so about half are under renewal assessment, and of those, almost half are delayed by 5 years or more, and I think for 6 or 8, the delays are even in the order of 10 years or more. So the current system is not working exactly as it was intended to be. As a result of these delays, we have to extend approvals using Article 17 of the regulation, which is something that is criticized in particular by NGOs such as PAN, but we have no choice because the procedures are delayed, as I mentioned. The member states have also flagged to us that the vast majority of their resources is bound by the renewal procedures, and therefore they are not available for assessing new active substances and products, which hinders innovation and transition to a more sustainable plant protection portfolio. And to give you an idea, we have about 70 procedures for new active substances that are pending. Also, all of them massively delayed. And in particular, for small and medium-sized enterprises that are very active in innovative areas such as biocontrol, this is a real problem because A, they have trouble in securing financing for their businesses, and sometimes they have to wait 2-3 years before a member state is even ready to accept a dossier. And then the processing of the dossier is also not as fast as it should be. So one of the main objectives of the proposal, therefore, is to use the limited resources that are available in the member states and also for the European Food Safety Authority and ourselves more effectively, and reassess active substances based on the need rather than an automatic time-driven review. However, and I really want to emphasize that and will elaborate more in the next slides, there are safeguards to ensure that the current high level of protection of human health and the environment is maintained. And now the next slide, please. So among these safeguards are the fact that the approvals for more hazardous substances will remain limited in time and they will be regularly reassessed. And I come back to that in more detail in the next slide. The unlimited approval periods or substances that benefit from unlimited approval periods can be selected for a full or a targeted review based on new scientific evidence and technical developments. As a further safeguard, the product authorizations at member state level will remain time limited, and companies will have to submit applications for their renewal, which is then an occasion to also assess whether there is a need to reassess the active substance. And in addition, a review under Article 21, an ad hoc review, may be initiated at any time if concerns are identified. Next slide, please. So the principles that I just mentioned are enacted in 2 of the proposed articles in the package, Articles 5 and 14. Article 5 is about the first-time approvals, 14 about the renewals of approvals, do now allow, or we propose that they would allow unlimited approval periods to be established with exceptions, however, and in particular for active substances that are identified as candidates for substitution. There, the approvals would remain limited to the current length of 7 years. And also for active substances that may be approved under the derogation possibilities of Article 4.7, when there are no alternatives available for containing danger to plant health, they will remain limited to 5 years. And we have also proposed that when the Commission and the Member States decide on an approval after a scientific assessment, they can still set a limited approval period in case there are uncertainties remaining in the risk assessment, and in particular if EFSA or the rapporteur member state have identified data gaps that indicate the approval should be revisited in a relatively near future. Next slide, please. And in order to achieve the transition from the current system to this new proposed system, we have proposed an Article 27A that sets out that when the new regulation or the amended regulation enters into force, the approvals of active substances that exist at that time would become unlimited, except, as said, for active substances that are candidates for substitution, active substance approved under Article 4.7, and very importantly, active substances for which at the moment the approvals are limited and no company has applied for renewal. So those would stay limited and then expire at the date foreseen today. And also not unlimited would be the approvals of all the active substances for which a procedure for renewal of approval is ongoing. And as I said earlier, these are around 200 out of the 400 and just below 420 that we have approved today. So this means that practically the majority of the existing approvals will initially remain limited, the ongoing renewal procedures will continue, and only at the end of the renewal assessment will a decision be taken on whether the approval for the substances concerned can become unlimited, remain limited, or not be renewed. And as a function of that, the implementing regulation 540/2011, which lists all the approved active substances, will be amended accordingly. Next slide, please. Now, let me come back to these safeguards that we have proposed in order to ensure a continued high level of protection of human health and the environment. First of all, we propose to amend the existing Article 18 to include a provision obliging the Commission to periodically identify substances with unlimited approvals for which a full renewal procedure should be conducted. And for that, we will consult with EFSA. We will get proposals from the member states. All of that will be considered, including also the capacities available in the member state to become rapporteurs for a renewal procedure. And then we will define in an implementing regulation the active substances with unlimited approval that should become subject to a full renewal procedure. And the basis for the selection will in particular be indications that there could be concerns, safety concerns for human or animal health or the environment, or, for example, if we have updated a guidance document or other technical developments that indicate that active substances should be reviewed, particular active substances should be reviewed. The implementing regulation that we will then agree with the member states will identify the substances concerned, it will designate the rapporteur and co-rapporteur member state, and it will set deadlines by when companies have to submit applications for renewal, and also then introduce an expiry date of the active substance that is sufficient to allow for companies to submit an application and to complete the renewal assessment. Next slide, please. Then, and this is maybe the most interesting new provision, we have proposed that we could also set up work programs for more targeted reassessments of active substances. At the moment, you are probably all aware that a full renewal assessment is extremely comprehensive. The dossiers that are submitted are very large. So it takes companies a lot of time to prepare them, and it takes member states a lot of time to evaluate them. Whereas it should also be possible in our view, and that's why we have proposed this Article 18a, that we could focus a renewal assessment on particular aspects. For example, particular aspects related to human health, or particular aspects related to the environment, such as impacts on pollinators or impacts on non-target arthropods, or impacts on the aquatic environment. That would make the whole procedure much faster, because the data package to be provided could be focused on these areas, and the member states' assessment could also be more limited and hence faster than is the situation today. And for such targeted reassessments, we could select either substances with unlimited approvals or those with limited approvals. And again, we would use criteria as presented on the preceding slide, meaning particular indications, such as from scientific literature, that there could be particular problems in particular areas. And again, we would identify the substances concerned, what elements exactly would need to be addressed, identify rapporteur and co-rapporteur, and so forth. And after such a targeted assessment, the existing approval would then either be confirmed, modified, or potentially also withdrawn. And again, if companies do not submit applications by the date that has been indicated, the approvals will be withdrawn. Next slide, please. As the third very important safeguard, I mentioned that the product authorizations that the member states grant, and Mr. Grigoriou referred to that in his opening remarks, that it is indeed a competence of the member state to grant product authorizations, establish all conditions for use to ensure safety. They will remain limited in duration. the authorizations have then to be reassessed periodically. If needed, when assessing such an application for the renewal of a product authorization, the member states must propose also to the Commission that the active substance should be reassessed if they detect information that points in this direction. Furthermore, Article 56, the current Article 56, which obliges authorization holders to signal any new adverse information to the member states and the Commission, also remains in place and will be another way of getting alerted about the need for reassessment of an active substance. And Article 69, emergency measures, which allows the immediate suspension of placing on the market and use of products or substances, also remain in place. Next slide, please. So in order to handle this new situation that the product authorizations remain time limited, even when active substances contained therein have an unlimited approval, we propose an amendment to Article 32 to clearly specify that product authorizations cannot exceed 15 years if the active substances contained therein has an unlimited approval, or not exceeding 1 year from the earliest date of expiry of the approval of the active substances when they are limited. That's the situation today. Product authorizations can be maximum 1 year longer than the active substance approval. We also propose to amend Article 43 to ensure that the products are reassessed and what applicants have to submit for the reassessment. And we've also added a new paragraph to Article 44 that obliges the member states to check compliance of all existing plant protection product authorizations if there has been an update of the assessment of the active substance, also for a targeted update under the new Article 18A. Next slide, and that brings me already to the end of my presentation, as I didn't want to be too long. As said, there are many other issues in the proposal that I now did not present, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer to them. In particular, a big part of the proposal is about accelerating market access and giving certain advantages to biocontrol active substances and products containing them, reinforcing a mutual recognition among the member states, and also another component of a more sustainable plant protection system, clarify the rules for the so-called basic substances, as today's rules have been found to be unclear in many respects. The proposal is now before the Council and the Parliament, and I would like to thank the Cypriot presidency for the swift action that they have taken. There have already been several meetings in the Council working group to look at the proposal, the presidency is very committed to move the file forward quickly. So my thanks to them for that. And you all know that during the negotiation process, both the Council and the Parliament can further amend the proposals from the Commission. And we stand ready to work constructively both with the presidency and the member states and the Council and with the Parliament to achieve an agreement on a final text to be adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Beren, for this informative presentation. If there are questions, please keep them at the end of the panel. So I would like to ask Dr. Angeliki Lysimachou, Head of Science and Policy of CAN, the floor for her presentation. And at the end, we are going to accept your questions for the two presentations.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you to the University of Cyprus for hosting this meeting and inviting us. It's a very important topic, and I congratulate Cyprus for having the presidency, but we also have a very important task to maintain the high level of protection for human health and the environment when it comes to the use of pesticides. So before diving into the topic of today's presentation, we're gonna before there's a microphone, but I was hearing. So we take the research.
So can you hear us on Zoom?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. Hmm. Or I can. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. So a few words about Pesticide Action Network in Europe. Who are we? We are a science-based NGO. We are based in Brussels, and our team is composed of scientists, legal experts, and policy officers. We have a network of over 50 organizations across Europe, and altogether we're fighting to reduce the use of toxic pesticides in agriculture and replace them with ecologically sound alternatives. So the reason of before we dive into the topic of today's of the presentation of this panel, that already European Commission started talking about, I would like to highlight that indeed we have a very good pesticide regulation in Europe, at least in theory, and it's a very strong legal text, and it prioritizes the protection of human health and the environment over the sales of pesticides and pesticide products. So now we have moved away from protecting just the farmers, and we realize that pesticides have impacts to all society because we consume food that contains pesticide, but also people that live in agricultural areas are exposed to pesticides. So the regulation asks to pay particular attention to the protection of children. So vulnerable groups have to be protected, pregnant women as well as biodiversity, water resources, and ecosystems. Now, realizing that a lot of the science that has led to highlighting the impacts of pesticides, like the famous DDT, for example, was academic science. The regulation is asking to take independent science into account when we are evaluating the safety of pesticides. And of course, to do an objective, transparent, and independent assessment. So when we say independent, we're talking about the industry that has an interest to sell these products in the market. And above all, we have the precautionary principle in Europe, and we are very proud of it. Unfortunately, it's not very well implemented, but it does say that we don't need to prove every single danger or risk, but we can take political decisions even if we suspect there's going to be a risk. Okay. So the pesticide legislation has been successful to an extent, and some of very toxic pesticides have now been banned in Europe. And here I'm just going to bring 3 examples. We have a fungicide, It's called mancozeb, that is toxic to reproduction. It's an endocrine disruptor. This means it can affect children. It was banned a few years ago. Then we have chlorpyrifos, it's an insecticide, organophosphate, and we know that it's neurotoxic. This is the actual action for the insects, and it causes brain damage in children, and luckily was banned a few years ago. And we also have neonicotinoids. These are based on the action of the nicotine, and they are really toxic for bees. And the more research we do on them, we're finding out that they're actually very toxic for humans, and they can affect healthy pregnancies and fetus development. So what was key in these examples that I brought here is that we have used a lot of new scientific information. So academic research played a key role into banning these pesticides. European Commission a few years ago, they did an evaluation of the pesticide regulation to see if it's fit for purpose, which means like if the objective of a high level of protection is met, and they found it is, so the regulation is actually a good regulation. But what I want to bring your attention to is that they found that what they highlighted as important was like because it had strict approval criteria, so certain toxic substances must not be used as pesticides, but also because we have mandatory regular reviews. So the toxicity of the pesticide has to be regularly evaluated. And there were a few problems because we still have toxic pesticides, unfortunately, in the market. And they highlighted that this was because of lack of resources in member states, which we heard also from Klaus before. And so our partner organization, Generation Future, said, okay, so how many pesticides have been banned because of these regular reviews in Europe? And we found that 54 toxic pesticides have been banned because the application was provided by the pesticide company, but in the review process, they were found actually is toxic and cannot be authorized. And coming to the topic of this panel, so before we have our omnibus on food and feed, I love to talk about simplification, competitiveness, reduce costs for the industry, and so on. But the main objective was because we want to increase biocontrol, so safer pesticides. We want to move away from the dependency to chemical pesticides. That was the original idea behind this proposal. And our concern as a civil society organization that we're looking into these procedures very closely is, has this been a Trojan horse? Is it this way that we're going to end up deregulating all pesticides, and with the guise that we want to push biocontrol substances, at the end we're going to maintain synthetic substances in the market for longer? So I want to bring 4 points into your attention here, which we find as major concerns. So we're going to go through them one by one, so you don't need to read them here. So the first one, as we heard, is that the proposal wants to make the limited approval for active substances as the norm. So now pesticides that they enter the market, they stay there for a limited time. As we heard, so this is different from the current situation because now we have the first approval when a pesticide first enters the market. It can only stay for 10 years because we have to check if there was damage in reality because, as you know, evaluation is based on models and not on reality. And then on renewals, we go for 15 years because, okay, once it's been for 10 years, we know more or less if it's safe or not. But now what we hear is like that these substances will enter the market unlimitedly. So there are some exceptions. As we heard, is the candidates for substitution. This is a number of pesticides that we know they're more hazardous than others, but this is only 10% of the active substances, so it's a very small percentage. Then we heard that the ones that there is ongoing assessment, we're still going to do the assessment. So okay, that makes sense, but then we don't know if at the end of the assessment they will receive unlimited authorization or not. And then we also heard that for new substances, like the ones that they will they're going to be reviewed now. They might have, if there are some risks identified, they might receive a limited approval. However, this is not very clear. So our partner organization, they had a look and they said, okay, how many pesticides will be affected for sure? And they found out 49 substances. And it's very concerning because in these 49 substances, we have some really dangerous ones. Like, for example, acetamiprid. Acetamiprid is non-nicotinoid, is also neurotoxic. We heard EFSA recently came up with a statement, and I believe they said it can cause toxicity, neurotoxicity. So, and it can it can pass the blood-brain barrier and can be found in cerebrospinal fluid in fetuses. So it's really like serious. Then we have 2,4-D. This is another pesticide. There's a lot of evidence that it could be an endocrine disruptor. We have glyphosate. Glyphosate was proposed as a carcinogenic from the International Agency for Research of Cancer. And all of these will receive unlimited approvals. So we have very big question marks about this. So the Commission has said, yes, we heard that they're going to do targeted assessment, but the criteria are really unclear. So I don't know which one of these 49 we will have out of these 49, which ones will receive a targeted assessment. We don't know. And also seeing how slow the procedure is already now. Like, for example, we have evidence that acetamiprid is neurotoxic for over 10 years. EFSA has requested a developmental neurotoxicity study, and we don't have it. So I really don't know how this procedure will work. Second point is that we're not going to use anymore the latest science when we do the authorization of products at member state level. So we have two levels of authorization. One is the EU level. So this is the active substance and there are limited approvals that we heard. And then we have a national level, the product authorization. So it's a product that contains the active substance. And in this case, right now, member states, when they check if a pesticide product is safe, they can use the latest science. But now what the Commission says is proposing is like no longer to use the latest science, but to use the science that was used when the active substance was authorized. And we know that sometimes it could be 15 years. Now about grace periods. The grace periods we call them grace periods because once a pesticide is banned, we can keep it in the market until we sell the products and all the stocks are being used, even if we know it's very toxic. So right now, the maximum period they can receive is 18 months. So after 18 months, it has to be removed from the market. So now the Commission says, okay, let's move that, make it to 3 years. So 3 years is a long time to continue being exposed to a pesticide that could be very dangerous to human health. So we also we highlight this as a risk that is going to be abused. We see now also for pesticides that they are dangerous, the endocrine disruptors, they still receive the maximum period. So even though they have, the Commission says in the document that unless there are immediate and serious concerns, we really doubt that this will be possible to prove. And exceptions, the proposal, this is the point where they broaden the exceptions. When can we use banned pesticides? So we have a pesticide we identify as very dangerous for the health. We've done a lot of testing, and we know that it's, for example, it's toxic to reproduction or it's an endocrine disruptor. And here the Commission will still give an exception to use this chemical for another 5 years, plus 3 years, the grace period, so you get the stop. There are some no's, like for example, if it's a mutagenic or causes cancer to humans, then it cannot be banned. But then we see like on purpose, endocrine disruptors or those that are toxic to reproduction or some carcinogenic substances are excluded. I don't have time to talk about this, but this also affects biocides, and I'm mentioning it because we're going to hear later about biocides. So unlimited approvals for the biocide products are also proposed. And something that we also concern is about a derogation that we saw in the sustainable use of pesticides directive. And this is from aerial spraying in order to start using drones, like in agriculture. So what's interesting when we see this proposal is that it really echoes some of the industry's demand. And I want to highlight this because who is behind, who is driving the wheels here? Who is demanding this, these changes? And it's interesting if you see, for example, when in this public consultation that we had NGOs, civil society scientists, as well as industry, the majority participating, you can see that in the buyers, for example, position paper, they do talk about to replace these obligatory reviews of the pesticides, and they propose actually to make them unlimited. I don't know if you see here. Yeah. So then they also say, okay, but let's apply no ban without alternative. They have made a slogan, a principle. And this is what we see now, because we see that in the derogation, they also have to, in order to assess whether there is an alternative or not, they have to compare the yield. So they will say, I produce a monoculture with only carrots, so much with these pesticides. Can I produce the same without using an alternative? And sometimes you might not produce only carrots, you might produce, you have to diversify your field if you don't want to use pesticides. So maybe it's not a fair comparison. And the other thing that is really interesting, they're asking to modernize endocrine disruptor assessment. And this is where we've seen that they are actually giving a derogation to continue using endocrine disruptors after these have been identified and should be banned according to the law. So we see that the first check, yes, they followed what the request, and the second one and the third. And we also had some scientific statements. So these are scientists that are working in the field of health and environmental protection. And they have clearly said that we need to strengthen the protection from pesticides, chemical pesticides, and we have to use the latest independent scientific knowledge. And we have to continue these mandatory reviews. And they also ask to expand, we need to look at mixtures exposures. We're not just exposed to one pesticide, we're exposed to many pesticides and many other chemicals as well. And maybe we have to use this evidence to decide on the authorization or not. It's currently not. So to conclude, in the European Commission proposal, we see that it goes against the demands of European citizens. We've been asking to move away from this synthetic toxic pesticide agriculture, and the Commission agrees, but we see that this is doing the opposite. Also, it goes against scientists' proposal and recommendations. We've seen that it actually favors the industries of the companies and, of course, the high profits. And then the initial objective to improve market accessibility to biocontrol product is actually hampered, is blocked by continuing the availability of synthetic pesticides. We're going backwards. I mean, these non-limited authorizations, we had them before the 80s, when we had like so many pesticides in the market that it was difficult to keep track. And then we don't see the real bottlenecks, like taking into account mixtures, exposure to mixtures, having a good quality data in the industry dossiers. Many times the industry submits dossiers and there is data gap. So that's why it takes really long time for the member states to do the assessment. And then what about using independent literature, like into the decision? Why are we not seeing more pesticide products getting banned and so on? And of course, the last thing is like, okay, we might want to reduce costs and simplify and competitiveness, but this must not be done at the cost of human health, environment, and biodiversity. And with this, I want to close the presentation. I'm happy to ask questions. I know this is a bit of a technical issue. Thank you very much.
So we would like to thank both presenters for their interesting and informative presentations. If there are any questions, please go ahead for the two presenters. Any questions, either from the audience or from the Zoom platform? Okay, I'll start with one question. I noticed for Dr. Lysimachou, I noticed that you mentioned about mixtures. This is something very important because pesticides are not single chemicals. So they are complex mixtures. And there is a synergistic effect, taking into consideration that some crops may have 2 or 3 or even more pesticides in their final product. So I would like to have your opinion on that, or Mr. Berend's opinion on how this is going to be addressed in the near future.
Maybe
Mr. Berend, do you want to?
Yeah, I can. If you want, I can start and use the occasion also to react some of the points that Angeliki made in her presentation. In particular, the mention of acetamiprid and glyphosate as receiving unlimited approvals. Angeliki, I think you are aware that for acetamiprid, we have triggered actually a review of the approval under Article 21, and that is ongoing. So it's unclear and remains to be seen how this ends and whether it will become unlimited or not, or even be withdrawn. So it's not correct to present this as acetamiprid becoming unlimited. And the same for glyphosate. We have asked EFSA and ECHA to look at a new study that the Ramazzini Institute has published. There are 5 court cases ongoing, one triggered by PAN against the renewal of approval. And we have confirmatory information that has to be provided in a couple of years. All of this leading to a review of the approval. So again, it's not correct to say that the approval of glyphosate will become unlimited just like that. The grace periods that you mentioned, the prolongation, first of all, it's a decision by the member state to take whether they grant grace periods after a non-approval or non-renewal of approval. Non-renewal of approval. So not all member states will do it, and it will depend on their circumstances. And the alternative, as we see today, is that they use emergency authorizations because when they don't have alternatives available, and that's something that PAN is also criticizing heavily. So we believe that with longer grace periods, we can avoid emergency authorizations. And then your criticism of the fact that endocrine disruptors could benefit from the derogation under Article 4.7, that's actually the situation today also. So we are proposing no change in that regard. I really want to clarify that. And also the criticism that it's not possible to use the latest science, that's not correct. The member states can very well do that, but they then need to ask the Commission to review the approval of the active substance if that is needed. And now to your question, Mr. Chairman, the mixture or the assessment of mixture toxicity of PPP as a whole is indeed an issue where there is ongoing scientific development needed. EFSA has worked in recent years very much on the assessment of combined exposure to residues in food. And we also look at the assessment of the products, of all the components in the products as part of the approval procedure. And member states have to do that at the national level when they grant product authorizations. But again, the scientific methods that we need for that are not all available yet. But that's a matter of the technical implementation of the current legislation. And our proposal, the omnibus, or the simplification package, does not concern that at all. It's a matter of further refining the technical tools that are available for conducting risk assessment today, and also if and when the simplification package will have been adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Berend, for clarifying this. Perhaps Dr. Lysimachou would like to add something on that.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yes, so it's true that since 2005, the law says that we have to take mixture toxicity into account, the synergistic and additive effects, and it's been 20 years that the Commission and EFSA is working on a method. They haven't delivered. We know that there are synergistic and additive effects. These are not taken into account currently. They could have a let's say preliminary approach and have an additional safety factor, but right now they're just not doing anything. And it's worrying and concerning because we testing last month we published a report on apples and we found that 7 pesticides can be found in a single apple. So I mean it's not the norm. Normally we have 3 or 4 pesticides per apple, but this is again something that is not taken into account in the risk assessment. We're still treating substances as we are exposed to one single substance only. And yes, and then for the rest, I would say that I don't think it should feel any reassuring to say because member states want to keep using derogations, exceptions to use toxic pesticides. Therefore, let's give them more grace period to allow them to use them, or for the article also for 7, if endocrine disruptors can still be used. Now you're giving also this to compare the yields. You also give them opportunity to be able to use it because we know that up to now they couldn't really, they weren't approved under this derogation, but now there is an opportunity that could be approved. So really, I don't find it reassuring, but let's not have this debate here, Mr. Barron.
Well, why not? I mean, that's why the event is taking place, isn't it? Huh? And also on your comments on the residues and the exposure to multiple residues, EFSA has actually already published 2 reports on that, finding that the mixture or the exposure to multiple residues is not of concern because the toxicity is dominated usually by 1 or 2 substances that have the most potency with regard to a particular effect. So EFSA is working on this, and the reports that have been published today are actually reassuring. And the choice of, and I share your concern, Angeliki, that member states are maybe too liberal and some member states in granting emergency authorizations. But what is better? Having them give emergency authorizations or allowing them longer grace periods so that they can regularly approve an alternative when there is no alternative available. That's a choice to be made. And we found that having this better framed in the terms of the grace periods is preferable to use of emergency authorizations.
Well, yeah. It will be a long conversation for us, because the EFSA didn't take into account the most sensitive scientific study. Like, for example, the developmental neurotoxicity study was excluded when they were looking at the impact of mixtures into...
But they are working on that now. They did initial reports focusing on 2 particular organs, and they are working on more right now. There is an action plan to enlarge this methodology, and that is being executed. I understand that you find this too slow, and I also get sometimes impatient, but science moves at the speed that science moves. We cannot force that by saying you need to deliver this by a certain date when it's simply not possible.
Well, we know there's been scientific evidence for over 3-4 decades, so science is not going that slow, but I understand. Okay, so I think we...
Yes, we have to stop here because we are around 15 to 20 minutes below the time. Thank you both once again for your presentations.
And thank you for the invitation again. And I wish you a successful rest of the day, of the morning.
Thank you. So I would like to proceed to panel 2 with our guests, Professor Mark Rees, Dr. Lysimakou, and Dr. Middleton. Dr. Mark Rees? Yes, it's been chaired by Dr. Panayotou.
If you don't want to,
yes.
Time.
Yes, please.
So good morning again. Welcome to panel 2. And our first speaker is Konstantinos Makris. Konstantinos is the Professor of Environmental Health at the Cyprus University of Technology and head of the newly renamed Clotho Lab on exposome research in children. And he'll talk to us about some data from schools in Cyprus.
Thank you very much. Good morning once again. So my talk today will actually share and hopefully stimulate more questions rather than the results. So my presentation is going to be about an exploratory dust sampling survey we did about pesticides in Cyprus households. So as you understand, the dust is a relatively new matrix to study pesticide exposures. And this is because there is more and more scientific evidence that call for paying attention not only to the dietary sources of pesticide exposure, which appears in many cases to be the predominant exposure source, but also to other potential sources, such as those that come from air-related exposure to pesticides, and how this pesticide drift, as they call it, from nearby users of pesticides can facilitate the transport and fate of gaseous and particulate components of pesticides to reach households. And also there are other sources that these particulates eventually end up in our households, and over time they will settle. They will be part of our furniture, of our beds, and other locations in the house that usually we come in contact with, especially vulnerable populations like children, for example, that they also have a tendency to do these hand-to-mouth activities. So this is basically the main idea behind the presentation. So basically, I would like to start first, which are the major health-based evidence that allowed us to infer some solid evidence regarding the pesticide health effects. So this primarily comes from the United States and the Chamacos cohort in the California Valley, where they were instrumental to basically study the effects of pesticides in the cognitive function of children. And as you can see here, there were a series of cohort-based observational study results that showed how organophosphates, these were the main class of pesticides used in the United States, how these organophosphate exposures were associated with shorter pregnancies, poorer verbal abilities, problems of attention, even traits similar to autism at ages of 2 and 14. As you can see here, some results. As on the x-axis, you see the urinary metabolites of these organophosphate pesticides in mother before giving birth. And on the y-axis, you see various cognitive functional characteristics of the children born by these mothers. So you can clearly see, as you increase the dose of these pesticides to the children, you can see how these levels affect memory, affect processing speed, even IQ points. So these are some very solid results that also allowed us in Europe to set up this HBM-based assessment of the brain and neurological system influenced by different classes of pesticides. You can see with a yellow and red color here, basically the major behavioral disorders or neurodevelopmental disorders that are associated with organophosphates and pyrethroids. Obviously, we have this evidence primarily for children and fetuses, and we need more data for adults, men and women. And we also would like to focus again on childhood, because it's a very critical life stage of vulnerability because of the Barker hypothesis and the plasticity of the organism, and how the children are not young or small adults and how we need to address this enhanced sustainability to various environmental stressors during childhood, because they rapidly develop, they rapidly grow, they have differences in the metabolism of many of these compounds as soon as they enter the human body. And also, many times, we as parents, we influence also enhance also the body burden of our children's pesticides with various activities. And we see also how lung function risk trajectories are influenced during this period, obesity risk trajectory during early life, and particularly in 5 to 11-year-olds, as we see on the example here, how this time period appears to be accompanied by enhanced risk of obesity prevalence during that period. So the main message of this slide is that we need to pay closer attention to the childhood and how pesticide exposures during childhood could potentially enhance some pesticide-related effects, either in childhood or later in life. Coming closer to the presentation, the results that I would like to share with you today is emphasizing again the importance of integrating both dietary and non-dietary exposures when we refer to pesticides. And this is because children are disproportionately vulnerable to pesticide exposures because of higher intake indices relative to body weight, multiple exposure pathways that I mentioned before, food, water, household dust. This is something that we're going to pay attention to, proximity to agricultural fields. So non-dietary pesticide exposures can occur either as a result of residential pesticide use, inside home with different biocides, in the garden, when we have pets, personal insect repellents, proximity to agricultural fields, time we spend in parks that have previously sprayed with different pesticides. So all these are different exposure scenarios that we need to take into account if we want to collectively characterize and more precisely and accurately characterize the variability in pesticide exposure, something that is usually the main limiting factor in better delineating the human health effects of these compounds. There are some indoor dust pesticide studies already, as we know, focused mostly on rural and agricultural settings, studying populations usually without and with also occupational exposure to pesticides. So we see from these studies that the number and the concentration of these pesticides in indoor dust are significantly higher than what is correspondingly measured in the outdoor dust. And it looks like that pesticides indoors can persist for a longer period of time, implying that we might need to consider also these passive exposures to this kind of pesticides, just like we do, for example, with smoking and passive smoking, for example. So obviously we need better measures to characterize and mitigate the risk of pesticide exposure associated with indoor exposure sources. So this is a small pilot survey that we did to explore the magnitude of contamination with pesticides and house dust from areas near ag areas, and to evaluate the percent and extent of pesticide contamination with banned or highly toxic pesticides. So we recruited 10 households based on the proximity being less than 200 meters from an agricultural land in different districts of Cyprus. So participants were asked to collect the dust sample from the house with a vacuum cleaner, usually an electric one. So we wanted to focus on the presence of about 50 pesticides, either marketed or banned in the European Union, and be measured in the dust sample. So we took one sample over a period of about a week, collecting dust samples from each house. So then each house gave this sample together with a contextual questionnaire, asking different questions about the type of the dwelling, the distance, the use of pesticides, if any, the use of biocides, for example, for treating pets, pet fleas and other kind of household pet parasites. And then we analyzed the dust for pesticides and using mass spectrometry in an accredited lab. So overall, these are the key pesticides and biocides that we have actually been able to measure in 10 different, as you can see here, households in Cyprus with different compounds. The DAS means that was below limit of detection. So you can see some common, as you can see here, pesticides, some of them that are not used, are banned for using pesticides, but they appear that they are authorized for use in household pet treatment for fleas, etc. We also measured some biocides here. This is like a proxy of, indeed, there is some cleaning operating in the house. We also have some other pesticides that are either banned or used for as insect repellent, for example, and some other neonicotinoids that you can see here. So basically the results show that there was also a house with up to 9 different pesticides in the dust of it. Some other houses, out of the very little number that we collected, had very few pesticides in it. Obviously a very wide variability. But as I said before, this survey is more about triggering, asking more questions and better understanding this exposure scenario rather than giving answers at this stage. Obviously, the mixture exposure effects of having different pesticides measured also in the dust of these households is a question mark, is an important question to address scientifically. We observed some banned, European banned pesticides in the house dust, carbendazim, cepimethrin, and imidacloprid, and we think also phenolphthalein is also banned for use as a pesticide. However, as I mentioned before, there are some active ingredients that are banned for use as a pesticide, but they are authorized for use in pet flea treatment. So this is something that we need to address. For example, the fipronil was widely and frequently detected in the samples that we took from dust. So we are almost certain that this might be coming from household pet flea treatments. Imidacloprid, this is a long band and it's a bee killing and neurotoxic compound, was found in most dust samples, almost in all of the dust samples from different households. It appears that it's also used as a pet flea treatment compound. Acetamiprid that we found in some households, this is also highly concerning bee toxic pesticide and in need, as discussed before, also of developmental neurotoxicity study in humans. This is something that is pending, as we can see, and carbendazim is also long banned in the European Union. So we don't know if this is actually used also as a biocide in the studies. So to close, some take-home messages. I believe if we want to come closer to better characterizing pesticide exposures for humans, we really need to address both dietary and non-dietary sources. And we see that in addition to the mixture effect, big question mark that we have as a scientific community, we need also to pay more closer attention to the exposure scenario that is associated with the use of these pesticides as biocides for pet flea treatment, for example, because everybody almost might have pets at home, maybe children. So this regular contact between children and these household pets, which is very beneficial. On the other hand, we need to minimize the scenario of exposing our children and also the other household owners to increased concentrations of these active ingredients that appear to be toxic to humans. So the much needed paradigm change that the European Union is preaching and appraising obviously will take time. And obviously, we need to continue working on these topics to better understand the exposure to pesticides and, of course, the health effects, and how we can protect our public and our vulnerable populations from these continuing multiple exposures to different pesticides. So I would like to thank the Special Interest Group on Pesticides and Health from the International Society of Environmental Epidemiology that I'm leading with Professor Eskenazi from University of California. And I would like to invite all of you to learn more about this scientific group and be part of this initiative as we try to bring together all the scientists and communities that work on and have an interest on pesticides from around the globe to get together and to exchange information, knowledge, and activities. And of course, thank our Children First Observatory that is operating in Cypriot schools with special emphasis on children's health. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Konstantinos. We'll be giving questions for the session at the end, so please remember them. And it's my pleasure to now call again on Dr. Angeliki Lysimachou from the Pesticide Action Network in Europe to address us again.
After we heard a very concerning topic about exposure in houses, household environments, I'm going to bring us to another issue, also a bit concerning, and this is about PFAS pesticides. I don't know if you're familiar with PFAS. These are chemical substances, synthetic. We produced them some years ago. And we find now that they don't break down, so we call them forever chemicals because they remain forever in nature. And many of them have serious health impacts. So I'm going to tell you a story. This is my team working. They couldn't be here today with us. So I'm presenting on the behalf, and it's not just us, it's a network that we've been working on. So I'm starting always the presentation to say that we have a good pesticide regulation, as I said before, but unfortunately it's not implemented in practice. And we have evidence for this, so it's not. I'm not here just telling stories without evidence. I am a scientist myself. I come from. I have an environmental, scientific, and toxicology degree. And years of research before I went to Brussels. And what's important to understand is that pesticides are designed to be toxic to living organisms. So they are by design toxic, and we're finding out as research goes on that they're not only toxic to target pests, but also to other species, including humans. So one report is independent health research center from France that was later also looked by ANSES, which is a competent authority in France. And it published a report saying that there are health effects linked to pesticide use now, like 5 years ago. So these are mainly non-Hodgkin lymphoma and other types of cancers in occupational disease, so people that use these chemicals, as well as Parkinson's disease. So we're talking about really serious diseases that take long to develop. So it's very difficult then to go back and demonstrate where it comes from, but here we have the evidence, the occupational data. And as well as cognitive disorders in children, we heard before in the presentation by Konstantinos. So and also different types of cancer like leukemia in children. So there are serious reasons to show that toxic pesticides are still in use. This was later confirmed by European Environment Agency, and they gave also the human health perspective, but also the environmental perspective. For example, one of the most important contaminants of groundwater is pesticide, comes from pesticide use. So I think 1/3 of chemicals that we detect in groundwater today are actually pesticides used in food. And we, in research projects that we're coming out, we see also that there are different types of exposures. So, and we also detect them in soil, in food crops, air, water, also in human blood. So despite the strict pesticide regulation, we still have toxic pesticides in the market. So we were a bit surprised when the conversation started, the research started on PFAS chemicals. And we found out that we also have PFAS pesticides. So they actually put a fluorine into the molecular structure to make pesticides stay longer in the field, so they can have the toxic action. So it's made, it's deliberate. And it went completely, went through the risk assessment, because we realized that we have, right now, today, we have 30 PFAS pesticides approved. And when we looked at what's happening in the past 10 years, we found that the residues in fruit and vegetable have tripled. So instead of phasing, going away from these chemicals, we actually have increased them. And the commission was saying, yeah, but most of them are already flagged as toxic, but we saw that only 9 out of 30 are flagged as toxic, and the rest, there are serious toxicity issues and persistence, but they still remained in the market. What was really interesting was that almost all contain this three fluoride group, which is which means that they can degrade to trifluoroacetic acid, TFA. I won't say the name again, and which is highly persistent. We knew that. It's like it doesn't break down. It's unbreakable, as we call it. But when we look at the industry dossiers, so the application dossier, we found that there was very little data that actually PFAS pesticides degrade to this very highly persistent chemical. So we started investigating, okay, if it's very persistent, can we detect it in the environment? And we can. We actually went and collected with our members river water from different countries, and we found it in all the river water, surface water. And we also found it in the 6 groundwater wells. We went to wells and we picked up water and we analyzed it, and we found it in all of them. And then we said, is it also in tap water? Are we drinking it? And we are drinking TFA. So out of we analyzed 25 samples, and you can see that we found it in 95% of the tap water we analyzed. And we even went and bought like bottled water. We said, okay, is it also like in mineral water? And it was also in the mineral water in a lesser extent, but these areas are normally protected. We're talking about like really pristine sources of water. And TFA had made its way there as well. And then we thought, okay, what about wine? And why did we select wine? Because we can go and collect aged wine from 30 years ago. Someone donated their bottle from the 70s. And we managed to track down the contamination. So we saw that before the 90s, there was no TFA in wine. And then as the year started, it correlates with availability of PFAS pesticides in agriculture, you can see it goes up. And we also found it in organic sample, because what's happening is that TFA is very mobile. It moves around. It's like, that's why we can find it in tap water. We found it much less, overall it was much lower levels, but it means that it contaminates both conventional and non-conventional. And also, we found out that TFA is a breakdown product for other PFAS chemicals. But of course, here we would find a very strong correlation with the use of agricultural use and TFA. I will come back to this. And the next question was, where else do we have TFA? So we asked our members to go and buy something that you like. It's very common in your country. Like biscuits, bread, cereals, and let's analyze it. And we find it in 82% of the sample. And it's true that the majority were wheat-based. So here I just have the graph that shows that the average was much higher in wheat samples than non-wheat. This is rye, maize, oats, and so on. And the exposure, we saw that it was much higher from cereals than from water, but not from wine. But children don't drink wine, actually. So when we, so then if you look now in the literature in the last couple of years, we know much more about TFA. And there is scientific scientists raising alarms that this is an irreversible contamination, is alarming, and we have to take action to cut the pollution at source. We also find them in human blood. And what we found out the last years is that also that TFA is very toxic. It's really bad news, but it's true. In the past, we knew that it caused liver toxicity in rats. This is very common for PFAS chemicals. But now we saw, because there were a request they asked the industry to produce 2 studies. One was developmental study in rabbits, and the other one was in rats. And we found out that it causes malformation in the eyes and the skeleton. It causes thyroid effects and affects sperm quality. So it's really dangerous. Right now, as we speak, in the European Chemical Agency is doing a classification. It's going to be classified as toxic to reproduction category 1B. This is a very high hazard class. And yes, so this is ongoing. And what's interesting, and I want to I'm presenting this because I want to show you that it is a fight. So these 2 studies were produced by the industry, and if you read the reports of the industry, it seems as nothing is going on. So it seems that it's very low toxicity, that the effects were rabbit specific, that the effects in rats were not relevant, and they even propose safety value like 400 times higher than the one proposed by the European Commission. So we really have to be vigilant when we read these studies. Not everybody will go open the studies and go into the details. According to the pesticide legislation that we have right now, because TFA is toxic, all PFAS pesticides that produce TFA have to be banned. So this is in the law. We don't have to change anything. We have the law in force. So because of this toxicity, it's called relevant metabolite. This is like a term that is used. And the law says that relevant metabolite should not exceed 0.1 microgram per liter. And as I show you, this has been exceeded in many cases. And also it has been reproduced by member states, like monitoring studies and so on. So at EU level, we're asking the Commission to ban all PFAS pesticides. It's a very slow process. It's not going very well. But member states are taking the lead, and this is where we can also ask Cyprus and other member states to also start phasing out these pesticides from the market. We see right now at the Commission level that there were some decisions. For example, flufenacid is a PFAS pesticide. It was banned, but it was also an endocrine disruptor. So it was not banned only because it emits TFA. We see that there is ongoing activities. EFSA, European Food Safety Authority, is producing some safety values. We want them to be stricter. But we see also EFSA and NECA are developing new models to evaluate the fate of TFA into the environment. But for example, there is one substance, flutolanil, that produces TFA, and this is proven even by the studies that have been submitted in the renewal dossier. And the Commission has said to ban it, and it's not banned. So they cannot find agreement among member states to ban the substances that we know that we produce TFA. Similarly, we see that they prolong the authorization of other TFA emitters. And recently we've seen 2 cases by EFSA where for substances that we know that they emit TFA, they don't recognize it because it was not provided, the studies were not provided by the industry. So, solution, what can we do? Apart from banning, we have to realize that PFAS pesticides are non-essential. We have lots of other substances that you can use instead. The farmers don't know that they use PFAS pesticides. So if you inform them, they will, by choice, choose something else, even if it's another chemical. But there are also non-chemical alternatives. And for us, our aim, this way we see the true food security, is to go towards a truly sustainable food production model that doesn't use chemical pesticides. And we already have this into the directive. It says that we have to use integrated pest management. This is a way of farming that you use pesticides as a last resource. It has different techniques that is preventive rather than reacting once you have the pest. To boost organic agriculture, and of course to support farmers and give them knowledge, because before we heard the Commission say, oh, what can we do? And it's like, well, you can inform member states and farmers how, and support them financially in the transition to move away from these chemical pesticides. And of course to apply measures for water protection, because it's much more expensive to clean up than to prevent the pollution at source. So to finish with my presentation and link it also to what we discussed before, of course, simplification must not result in deregulation. We need to strengthen the implementation of the EU pesticide regulation to protect health. And here we see a case where we need to improve how we implement the law. Yes, we need to ban PFAS pesticides. We have the science, we have the law, so it's just a matter of action. And of course, above all, to push for a truly sustainable agricultural model that truly protects food security, protects fertility of our soils, it protects natural pest protection, and also clean water. And with this, I would like to thank you. Have the questions.
Thank you. So we'll keep the questions to an end. I will allow myself one minor comment, though. I couldn't help but remind myself, after all these talks, of the ancient Greeks of water and of air, that when we're discussing the health of people, we first must look at what we drink and what we eat and what we breathe in. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the latest speakers. They're a duo, so I'll introduce them together. Dr. Nikos Middleton is Associate Professor of Research Methodology at the Cyprus University of Technology and President of the Board of the Cyprus Epidemiology and Public Health Association. And Dr. Susanna Achilleos is Assistant Professor of Environmental Health at the University of Nicosia and Secretary of the Board of the CIEFA. And they'll talk to us about stakeholders and farmers' opinions, so very fitting.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Yes, we are a duo. I'm Nikos Middleton, and I'm standing here with my colleague Susanna Achilleos, and today we're representing the Cyprus Epidemiology and Public Health Association. And thank you for the organizers for giving us the opportunity to present the method, the process, and some of the findings of a stakeholder workshop we ran a couple of years back in collaboration with the Department of Agriculture here in Cyprus to understand the perceived challenges and recommendations for reduction of pesticide. So starting from the health effects of pesticide exposure, I don't have the time to go into it, but I just want to focus a little bit on the fact that there is a lot of studies out there on the health effects, and a lot of them have focused on the health effects on farmers, on people who make occupational use of pesticides, their families, their children, prenatal exposure, parental transfer to children, and so on. And if we want to summarize it, this could be health effects related to cancer, respiratory diseases, neurological, mental, endocrine, reproductive, cardiovascular, and so on. So the question is, do farmers know these health effects? And if they do, maybe they don't perceive the risk as high. Is that the question? Do they know, but it's not really a choice in terms of pesticide reduction use? obviously is not that simple. So from health evidence to policy, we need to go back to practice and start understanding what the current practices are and what are the perceptions of farmers, but also of authorities around how easy it is to tackle pesticide use. And recently, a lot of EU policies have triggered reactions among farmers in several EU countries. We're all aware of this, reflecting concerns about alignment between policy ambitions and on-the-ground realities. What are the on-the-ground realities? And particularly here in Cyprus, achieving some of the targets of EU policy, we need to start understanding how pesticides are used now and how the pesticide use, which is a behavior, is shaped in everyday farming practices and choices of farmers, and in specific sociocultural and sociopolitical contexts, one of them, Cyprus. So there are studies in the literature about the practices of farmers, their perceptions around several things. And again, I don't have the time to go into the literature, but if I choose one study, a recent study from Greece, farmers have studied the willingness of farmers to use, shift to lower risk pesticides, rather a small study from northern Greece, 24%, 1 in 4 reported preference for lower risk products. And it was associated with younger age, higher education, prior training in the harmful effects of pesticides, their risk perception, whether it does affect their health, so how high the perception of risk is, and the use intensity, how regularly they use it. And there are several studies like that in the literature. And a lot of them focus on the knowledge of risk and risk perception, the consequences to them and their families, like I said, but also their skills, procedural knowledge. Do they know of alternatives? Attitudes and beliefs general around health and environmental harm. The familiar conclusion from these studies is that farmers need more training. They need more awareness. They need more education, which is rather simplistic. With some exceptions in the literature, studies often miss two key things. Behavior, there is a whole behavioral science on what determines behavior. And a lot of these studies are not theory-driven and they don't use behavioral science. And the thing that we very often miss out is that there's a wider system around the farmer that shapes current practices, their choices, and a lot of these choices are not choices. They are beyond their control. So there are exceptions in the literature. I don't have time to go into behavioral science either, which, thank God, in recent years has becoming more and more used in public health approaches in general. There is many behavioral models. One that is very nice, very simple, very elegant, very easy to apply in practice, including during a workshop, like I'm going to show you in a minute, is the COM-B model. And it says that any behavior, not just our pesticide use or the willingness to reduce pesticide use, any behavior is determined by three main things. We need to be able to change the behavior, which means we need to have the knowledge, the skills to know how to do it. We also need to want to. We need to have the motivation to do so. So there needs to be incentives to do so. There needs to be beliefs that we can do it. We need to be able to put goals. We need to be motivated towards that change. The most important thing that we often miss out is the conditions and the context around us should allow it or even promote it. So opportunity. We need to be capable of change. We need to be motivated to change. And we need to be provided with the opportunity. When it comes to pesticides use, if I give you some examples what opportunity means, it could mean, is there access to safer alternatives? What about the equipment quality and maintenance for farmers to make that shift? Are there training opportunities and targeted guidance towards farmers? Social opportunity. What do others do? What do the farmers around them do? Have they made that shift? Are they willing to make that shift? Are they going to be the only ones making that shift? What about the market, the behavior of the end users, especially if the cost increases? So what about the regulatory context, the enforcement practices by the government, by the state, market and other pressures, and so on? So this is the sort of things we wanted to understand, applying the COM-B model in practice. So we run a cross-sectoral workshop in association with the Department of Agriculture. And it was structured in two parts. I'm going to present the first part, and then Susanna will move on to the second part. We invited a presentation from relevant authorities, academics, stakeholders, farmer associations, and we facilitated a participatory session to capture all the participants' perspectives. The main question was one: what do farmers and stakeholders in Cyprus perceive as barriers or challenges to pesticide use reduction, or which are the enabling conditions that could facilitate safe and more sustainable use? In the workshop on the day, there were 36 participants representing 12 organizations and several subdivisions of these organizations, from the Department of Agriculture, Department of Environment, General Laboratory, Public Health Services, Academia, Institute of Agricultural Studies, and farmer unions. Fortunately, you see the smaller number there, and this is the reason. Our workshop was scheduled for the 8th of February 2024, a 2 years ago, and on that day there was massive mobilization across Europe, including Cyprus, and farmers were out in the streets. And it just happened to be the same day as the workshop that had a preset date. However, at least 3 farmer associations sent a representative to our workshop. We think we need to repeat this with more farmer representation. So some of the things you will see perhaps are more skewed to the perceptions of the authorities and academia rather than farmers. So it was a 2-phase. The first phase was live during the workshop. The second phase was a questionnaire that the first phase informed its development, and Susanna will present the results of that. So we used a modified 2-stage nominal group technique, as we call it in methodology. What does that mean? It means that it was an audience like this, but it was participatory. Everybody had to take part in the conversation, so it had to be interactive. We presented a question based on your knowledge, your experience. What are the barriers and challenges, real or perceived, to the implementation of pesticide reduction measures? We gave everybody a piece of paper. Everybody silently could write up to 10 suggestions. We started a round-robin sharing session, which means 1 per person. Some ideas were common. We created a live mapping as the suggestions were coming. We debated them. We grouped some of them by consensus, and the input was mapped live and classified live according to the 3 domains of behavior that I mentioned before: capability, opportunity, motivation. Because we believe these exercises also have a learning purpose. We all cultivate a common understanding of behavior and determinants of behavior, and how complex it is to understand behavior through an interplay of factors. There were 51 suggestions. I cannot show all of them. I cannot go through all of them. Susanna will choose to show you the ones that then in the questionnaire were ranked top priority. But just to give you an idea of the model, capability, opportunity, motivation, and how interrelated they are, a couple of examples. Okay, farmers need to be motivated because of the perception of risk to their health or their families, perception of health impacts. But then the question becomes, how are they made aware of this so that they're motivated to change behavior? Are there health records? Are there epidemiological studies from the local population? Do we monitor health indicators? That belongs to the opportunity. Unless they have the opportunity to come in contact with this data, they won't develop this motivation. It's a lot about their own knowledge, not of health effects, of other things, of non-chemical alternatives, or economic assessments, farm management, planning, how to use pesticide use records, and so on. But then the question, that's capability, but then the question becomes, do we have practical training programs? And are they addressing these real needs? So then again, we move to the opportunity. All these are interrelated. One is probably determined by something that belongs to a different category, and hence a different actor should act upon it. And with this, I can move to the second phase, which was informed by the first phase. We took these 51 suggestions and developed a questionnaire, which was sent to all the participants. And I'm passing on to Suzanne. Thank you.
The second phase, we used this mapping that Nikos just described to basically put a questionnaire, anonymous questionnaire, that it was sent online using the participants' registration email addresses in order to get a little bit more of understanding. So the questionnaire was divided in two parts. The first part, we are listing all these 51 items, and we ask them to rate each one how important they finding as being a barrier or a condition that can affect the safer use of plant protection products. And for each one, they had to rate it from using a 4-point scale, 1 as the not very important, to 4 as the extremely important. And then as a second part, because of these 51, items, we wanted to a little bit narrow it down and get an understanding of what will be for each person the 5 most critical factors that they see as, if they will address how much, increase the likelihood of succeeding and basically having a safer use of PPPs. So out of the 36 participants that in the workshop that day, we got back 25 responses, so around 70% response rate. And here we see which sector each participant's response were coming from. So more than half of them were coming from the agriculture sector, which was more expected because we had the most participation. And then another 10% from the other government services. 1/4 of them around from different academia and research institutions, and around 10% from farmers' unions. So just like clarifications, even the farmers' unions was also small participation. Most of our stakeholders that were coming in the workshop, they had direct working with people that they're using pesticides, plant pesticides in general as used. So what we see here, and of course we're not going to go through, but these are the 51 items and the percentage of the responses that they were ranked by extremely important, as you see in the light green. And these are ranked from in descending order of the percentage of people that they consider them as extremely important. So these vary between 70% of the people consider extremely important some to 20% of these consider extremely important the last ones. What we see in the green columns are the percentage of people that rated each of these 50 items at least very important. So either very important or extremely important. And as we expect, all of these items were considered important in general for all of the participants in that day workshop, but some of them, they are more in the higher or in the lower end of extremely important, which changes a little bit the image or our understanding, trying to understand some of these factors more. So, to get some snapshots of this ranking, the top 5, which were categorized as extremely important. So the responses we had, that most of the majority consider them extremely important. It was 1, the knowledge and perception of health impacts of the pesticides users and their families, the lack of a comprehensive, holistic, and long-term policy in terms of the use, the competition from imported with lower production costs, and also in association with the uncontrolled inflow of products from the northern part of Cyprus, which are usually in lower cost as well. Number 4, the people thought it was extremely important to have a good monitoring system in terms of how and how much the pesticides used are being used. So a good prescription and monitoring system. And 5, guidance and problem-solving support mechanism. So a mechanism that gives, the way on how to reduce the use. So at least half of our participants considered these, 5 items that I just went through as extremely important. And the majority, so around 80 to 90% of our responses, consider this either very important or extremely important. Also in other, also extremely important, considering other factors that were more related to the farming as a profession, whether it's been maybe considered, not really recognized by the society, or is not being attracted by the new generation, or there's a lack of financial incentives. Now let's look at the bottom 5, the ones that they were ranked as the lowest, or they were ranked as extremely important by the list of our participants. So in the lowest rank was the lack of studies on consumer preference for organic products in relation to cost. Even this, only 10% of our participants consider extremely important. More than half of them, they consider it either as very important or extremely important. So the ranking, taking the answers at least very important, changed a little bit. Number 2, maintain a health records for workers exposed to pesticides and monitoring health indicators for the PPP users themselves. Lack of monitoring mechanisms for foreign workers. Lack of trust in the ministry and other authorities regarding their intentions. And last, conflicting policies between government bodies and services. So you may see here different, components, and in terms of knowledge, in terms of policy, in terms of the farmers, the cost, and so on. So we wanted to get a little bit of, maybe zoom in a little bit more. And the second part asked to choose what are the 5 most critical factors or measures that could lead to the, succeeding or reducing the use of, enabling the safer use of pesticides. So these are the ones that they were chosen the most. Number 1, again, the knowledge of health impact. So if farmers and all the pesticides users know about, their risk, but also their families' risk from being exposed to pesticides, that could affect them. The knowledge of non-chemical alternative methods and technologies for controlling these effects, as mentioned previously, we need to give them, the know-how of the alternative methods. Uncontrolled inflow of products from northern part of Cyprus was still considered really significant or very important. Guidance and problem-solving support mechanisms. And something that will show up very only in this part is not targeted training and hands-on capacity building based on the farmers' real needs, along with the current product production costs. So again, here we see different components, whether this is support mechanisms, cost, knowledge, and so on. So these were actually very, especially in the academic and in the public health sector, very, learning a lot about the perception of these stakeholders. So if we had to conclude and put some priorities from what this workshop gave us as conclusions, is that it will be good to emphasize 1 part on the knowledge and informing and training, of course, all the plant protection users about the health effects and other options they may use, but also addressing other constraints, whether this is the cost or any monitoring system or alternative methods out there. So there is a call for more training based on this, but for that to be more successful, in being accepted also, we believe that we need to have it more tailored with the needs and also with the support of all the stakeholders, and make it more practical, useful, and give more alternatives, considering all these conditions. Okay. So the other thing, of course, that can be a barrier is not only within Cyprus, but in general across all the Europeans, is the mistrust from the different stakeholders and authorities. So next step, so the results from this workshop, what gave us as a learning is that at least from our part as the Cyprus Epidemiology Association, because I'm sure the Ministry of Agriculture that we are collaborating on this have their own actions that were already put in place. But from our perspective, we wanted to explore more and address some of these gaps that were identified in the first stage and work with closer with farming workers and all plant protection users. In order, so we believe that if we get a little bit more understanding directly from them, then this information can help us, but also all the relevant authorities to design a more, a training or a plan information that could be used as a more planning to co-design an implementation package along with the users themselves. But also make sure that this output is, of course, aligned with the, the economy and the market, and already, meet also the conditions of their profession, but also the productivity. So what we have been trying to do is, of course, pursue some funding. So we have been recently resubmitted a research proposal with the support of the Ministry of Agriculture. And this research proposal basically will allow us, if successful, to assess the knowledge, practices, and behaviors of pesticide users directly from the users themselves. So include them in this part. So broaden this and enlarge this study that was trying to start with this workshop, but also get more insight with all the relevant stakeholders. With that, will help us to, put a more educational intervention and training, so we can address the needs and the any obstacles that they're facing. We also added a part of the belief that we could be a motivation, and that will be to assess the internal exposure of pesticides to some of these workers, because we know in this, education and the social science that if someone feels that under the risk, they may get a different impact in terms of motivation. And design as a, involving all stakeholders, whether these are farmers, whether these are ministries or any other unions, like a design, but also assess and an intervention that can be adopted by all authorities, but also be feasible and sustainable through time. So that's from our part. I would like to thank all the members of the Cyprus Epidemiology Public Health Association, the Ministry of Agriculture who hosted that workshop and is still supporting us in trying to move this further, and of course everyone who's here and organizing.
Thank you to all our speakers. So we can now have a couple of questions, as we are a bit late for the coffee break. Yes, immediately.
Actually, it's not a question. I just thank you very much for the presentation. I just want to make a clarification. When they are referring to the northern part of Cyprus, they are actually referring to the areas that the democracy of Cyprus does not have, the government of Cyprus does not have effective control, and because of the occupation.
Yes, that's actually a valid comment, because it's not controlled, so the Minister of Agriculture has no control anyway on what is used. So that is a valid point. Thank you. And Dr. Ismail?
Yes, I really enjoyed your presentation, your work. Yes, it's really interesting also to see approach the farmers, because they are the ones that they are most affected. And I think, evidently, many of them are really under pressure right now. I was wondering, do you have data for epidemiology data in Cyprus? Like, for example, we hear, not in Cyprus, but generally we hear like stories of people that they have increased agricultural use and the diseases have increased, but it's anecdotal. And do we have actual evidence, like longitudinal epidemiology study or occupational diseases?
Can I quickly repeat the question? Yeah, and Nico, can you come up here? The question was, is there any epidemiological data on the impact of pesticides and health
On
on occupation for farmers?
I'll answer the question as best as I can, even though I think the gentleman behind you has the answer. You wanted to answer the question. Oh, no. I'll start from this point. It's very interesting how in this workshop, we ranked, no matter how we asked, the number one was to make the farmers aware of the health effects on themselves and their families. Yet, the bottom of the rank, right, was how important it is to have epidemiological studies, health monitoring for these potential health effects. In my mind, this is totally contradictory. Right? Because we know from behavioral science that, as Susanna has said, that the biggest motivator of changing behavior is beliefs of the consequences of your behavior. So I inform people about the knowledge that this pesticide use can't be harmful to themselves and their families without being able to actually show internal exposure, even in small studies, to show how they're affected. And epidemiological studies, which of course would take time to show what the health effects are, would act as a big motivator for behavioral change. But in terms of epidemiological studies in Cyprus, there are some studies focusing on pesticide use in children that Konstantinos was referring to. I'm not aware of any studies addressing farmers in particular, and I am not aware whether there is health monitoring.
Inspection, and there are some data there.
Yeah, that's the other thing, the monitoring versus academically published studies. So I don't think there is studies that have been published in the academic literature, but I'm sure there is data collected by state services, occupational health.
And this data is collected in central database.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit more how this data is used?
Exposure to asbestos is something that has been studied through the years, and we have a very good database on that.
Yeah. Is there a similar database for pesticide use?
For pesticides, I'm not aware. Probably would have to ask our doctor, occupational doctor.
Right. In the research proposal that Susanna was referring to, we brought the two together, and we thought that if we take the top rank and the bottom rank of the perceptions, it's very interesting to bring them together, because yes, we need training, we need to inform and raise the awareness among farmers and their families about the health effects, but you can't really do that unless you also have some monitoring to actually show them what is really happening. We think is really important.
I just wanted to make a comment. There is no data, as you asked, but there are a lot of examples of, especially in France, of people who have turned into permaculture, and the biodiversity has changed a lot, and the health of the children, of course, in those kind of family, it has changed a lot, and the health of the farmers. Okay, starting to breathe again and to have a sense in their life.
I was referring only to Cyprus.
Yeah. No, because
But in Cyprus as well, it's starting.
it's true. It's something that we find that is missing. That there is, because traditionally farmers are working outside, so it's considered a healthy occupation. But then now that we know for decades that they're using all these chemicals, and there is this trend of non-having coma, Parkinson, like very specific. Parkinson is actually an occupational disease, recognized an occupational disease in France, I think in Germany now, in Netherlands, and in Italy. So there is data, but it's a pity that we don't monitor it enough. like to then be back, go back and say, oh, well, look, this pesticide series should not be used. And it's not only that, it's also to make accountable, whose fault is it? Because it's definitely not the farmers, it's definitely not the citizens, definitely not so we have to, create a case.
Sophie, thank you, because there is a question also at the chat, although I'm not sure who it's addressed to. It says, is there an overview of the public costs and private profit? So possibly on the Dr. Lysimachu's side, or if anyone is aware, is there perhaps some data on the private profits of companies that produce pesticides, or the public costs? I'm assuming maybe for it's not very clear. Maybe the private profits of companies that produce pesticides. Are those open?
It's not completely transparent, as you could imagine. There is some data. I think what's also interesting to, in the previous, in the first panel, when the Commission presented the proposal, they also presented how much it costs each pesticide to be approved, and how much money they will save. But this was in cost on personnel, currently assessment and so on. And that's where we took the pesticides from. The 49 pesticides is actually coming from the Commission proposal. I didn't want to go into this. So you can see like the cost is enormous, so the profit is also small. But I have to look to see how much exactly.
I think the question is mostly on the side. I think the only people who are profiting are the companies that make pesticides, whereas if you look at everyone else involved, from the consumers to the stakeholders to the farmers, they all have a vested interest to reduce risk. So theoretically, it should be a non-question, but Nikos.
It's an answer, but also a more general comment related to cost. And again, going back to the findings of the perceptions workshop, which to us also means that we don't value research as much as we should. Because if I look at the bottom rank again, research studies on the increased production cost with the use of alternative methods in the Cypriot context was bottom ranks. We think it's not important. Yet again, if we don't have that, studies on how the cost of the farmers would production cost would be affected, how exactly can we do targeted training and convince people to make the switch without showing them the data on how the cost would be affected? Also, perceptions of the market, the end users, the elasticity of the prices in the Cypriot market, they were ranked at the bottom as being important. Again, the question I have is, if we don't know the behavior of our end users, including inflow of products with cheaper production cost prices from the occupied part of the country, which we don't control, the imported, not the use, but the imports, what's coming. That affects the behavior of the end users, whether they would choose them or not. If we don't have surveys on the behavior of the end users, how exactly are we going to do the training to influence farmers' behavior? So it's very interesting, I think, the aspect of cost, that not just the profits of the companies, but all the other sides of the cost and who is affected, that we don't have local studies or that I'm aware of, that we could use them as training tools.
Although one might argue that the health effects for them and their families are more important to perception of cost. One last question before we. Sorry, you wanted to just follow with this.
I think that already the system of calculating the cost is biased, because what's the cost? What's the value of clean water? What's the value of clean air? What's the value of biodiversity that provides its own pest control? Because once you start using pesticide. We call it the pesticide treadmill because you're trapped. You are weakening down the natural prevention of soil, how the plant absorbs the nutrients. So the plant becomes weak. So then you have to fertilize them. So the farmers are like get into this trap. And how do you calculate the cost? Because it's true that when we talk to farmers that they don't use pesticide, they have less investment. It costs less to not use pesticide,
In the end.
In the end, yeah, in the long term. Yeah.
I will be a mean coordinator and just allow one small question, and we can continue this over coffee.
Yes.
So I'll just cut it in half and you can answer which one you want. So it was a two-part question. The first one is with regards to the studies. Do you take in mind the epigenetic effects of these pesticides or the chemical substances? Because also they change form and potency once they enter the body. And the second question is regarding the farmers, and I guess that's for the Cypriot society and for Cyprus. The farmers don't only face like competition from the occupied area, but we also face competition from other countries because we see in the supermarkets fruits, vegetables from other countries, from America even, which we don't know where they are exposed to. So what can we do about that, informing the audience, the public and the farmers that they face this competition because they come at low prices and so they must live, but they also face the weather challenges, this competition. So what can we do about that?
I don't know what we can do about that, but I know that it was number 3 on a par with inflow from the occupied parts and competition with imported products, where number 3 is more important things to tackle in the Cypriot context.
Yeah, I think that would be an incentive to help them
And we can move this discussion outside. I appreciate this was a very interesting panel. And thank you all for being with us. Please come back in 20 minutes for the third session. Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome to the third panel, which consists of 4 very interesting presentations. Please, presenters, keep your time. We are late in schedule. So let's start with the first presentation, moving towards sustainable plant protection, the case of tuta absoluta control, from Lysandros Lysandridis, Head of Plant Protection, Department of Agriculture, Cyprus. The floor is yours.
So thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lysandros. So just a comment about the presentations before. So I think we've got a bit of a depressed climate, which was pretty much de-escalated by the presentation of Dr. Middleton. At that workshop, which was an excellent workshop, I was a part of it, so I'm a part of the percentages shown by Dr. Middleton. And I think there is a pretty much connection of what it was stated in the presentation with my presentation. So, sustainable plant protection to ensure environmental and public health is one of the primary goals of the Department of Agriculture. To achieve this goal, the Department of Agriculture has 3 sets of tools: financial support tools, consulting services, and legal tools. Now, nevertheless, in order to have better chances to succeed at it, we should use all the toolbox in our toolbox, and of course, we should have all stakeholders on board. So, what about legal tools? Do we have the necessary legal tools? Of course we have. Of course, I won't get into deep about applicability or enforcement of these legal tools, but we have the regulation we already talked about, 1107/2009, with the strict rules for placing plant protection on the market, and which led to over 50% reduction of authorized plant protection products. And we have the Directive 2009/128, which establishes the framework to achieve a sustainable use of plant protection products. Of course, legislation cannot be a standalone tool to achieve any goal. So let's talk about the consulting services we have, and I will use the Ruta Absoluta control as an example. So the Ruta Absoluta is an insect. It's the most devastating pest of tomatoes globally, which leads to approximately 80, even to 100% of.
Can't hear you very well.
Okay.
Is there a microphone or?
No. Okay, I will try to be more loud. No. So, as I said, Ruta Absoluta is one of the most devastating pests of tomatoes globally, and it leads to 80 to 100% yield losses of tomatoes. So, what we did, we said that the most important thing is to have stakeholders on board. The most important stakeholders to have on board, specifically for sustainable use, are the farmers. So we created these crop-specific working groups where all stakeholders participate to identify specific issues affecting their crops, prioritize them, and find ways where our consulting services may assist to find solutions. So in 2024, the tomatoes working group identified Ruta Absoluta as the main plant protection issue, which is very difficult to address with current practices, which are mainly the use of plant protection products. So we hear that there is a need for a solution. Now, is there a solution? According to literature, we have several reports on successful control with a predatory bug. This is Nesidiocoris tenuis, and you can see it feeding on eggs and larvae of Ruta Absoluta. But does this solution meet our policy? Of course it does, because first of all, it's a solution of a problem affecting a great number of farmers, a high-value crop with high demands for plant protection. And this specific solution meets both national and EU policy, the Sustainable Use Directive targets, and of course our national target to minimize the use of plant protection products. But did we have any local experience with using this insect, these natural animals? No, we didn't. But fortunately, experience were close to us in another southern member states. So because we are in very much cooperation with the Valencian Institute of Agricultural Research, IVIA, in Spain, with whom we cooperate about other phytosanitary matters, they told us about their successful story for using this product. So, So what we did is that we already sent in January 2025 two of our, let's say, best field agronomists for an on-field training in Spain to gain the expertise they have in Spain. Nevertheless, does this mean that this method is efficient in our local conditions? Because you must show that it is efficient if you want to convince the farmers to apply the method. So what we do is applied research. It's a very important, that's what I said before, that it's really connected with the previous presentation of Mr. Middleton. It's very important to choose the farmers. The farmers that are going to take a part to the applied research must be progressive, must be cooperative and disciplined, so to follow our instructions, willing to share experience and knowledge with others, and their opinion must be highly respected by other farmers in the region. This will assist mass dissemination of knowledge. So we started the first method in March 2025 on a spring crop that is already completed. It was completed in November, and we are still having ongoing another test in a summer crop, which will be ending in March 2026. From the preliminary results we have a successful control of Tuta absoluta, but also with two other insects, aphids and thrips, and partly Tetranychus species. We had high production of high quality tomatoes. We have a minimization of plant protection products treatments for Tuta absoluta control, which we estimate that with current practices, we have 20 treatments per season for the control of Tuta absoluta. If it was necessary through the program, through the test, to have a complementary method, we only used Bacillus thuringiensis product, a biological product. And of course, we had a lower cost for production. What is the drawback? Only that we have too many variables to consider through the whole implementation of this method. That means that you need constant monitoring and advice by an expert agronomist. So having that in mind, in our efforts to disseminate knowledge, our first group, our effort is to train the trainers, that is the agronomists from the public and private sector. Actually, yesterday I was told that this first training is scheduled for the 3rd of March. So afterwards, we will have on-field training of other farmers at the farmers' field where the method was tested. It's going to be like living labs. And of course, we are going to use all of our other dissemination methods, like our social media, the magazine of the Department of Agriculture, seminars, etc. So, as it was stated before, if you want to convince farmers to reduce the pesticide use, except of having a solution to the problem, you must use financial tools. So these tools we have are mainly agri-environmental measures and eco schemes through the Common Agricultural Policy. As examples, I have here the use of tolerant to nematodes potato varieties, implementation of soil solarization on annual crops, use of traps for mass trapping for the Mediterranean fruit fly, and no use of herbicides on tree crops, vines, and herbs. So what about Tuta absoluta, where there is no production loss to compensate, there is no higher cost for production to compensate, but maybe most probably we will consider compensating the need for advice, because it's very important for this method to succeed to have good and experienced advice. So, in conclusion, it is our belief that when you use all of the toolbox in our toolbox, legal tools, financial tools, and our services, consulting services, and if you gain the stakeholders to be on board, and of course, if you have an applicable, a sustainable solution, then you are moving towards step by steps to sustainable plant protection to ensure environmental and public health. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation and also keeping the time. The next presentation is about organic farming and organic diet in children and health benefits by Ms. Corina Constantinou from Cyprus International Institute of Environmental and Public Health, Cyprus University of Technology. Please.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. So I'm glad that today I will be presenting to you about our findings on the organic diet in children and health benefits. This is based on the Organico study, which is from the Organico project that is funded from the LIFE program. So a bit of a background, some things have already been mentioned. As we know, children have increased susceptibility to environmental exposures compared to adults. And this is because they have rapid development, they have differences in behavior compared to adults. For example, they have this hand-to-mouth activity. They also have a faster metabolic rate, and their metabolic pathways are still mature to metabolize these environmental exposures. As we know, based on the literature, exposure to pesticides has been linked with adverse effects on children's health. And this does not impact only their life while they are children, but also their future, their adult life. And some of these adverse effects have to do with somatic growth, with ASD and ADHD diagnosis, and also neurodevelopment effects and behavior performance tests. As we know, pesticides are ubiquitous, so children can be exposed through various routes to them. The main routes are through their family's occupational activities. We also have the proximity of their house to agricultural areas, the use of pesticides within the house and outside of the house, for example, in the garden. And also, children can be exposed through diet, which is what this presentation focuses on. So this presentation focuses more on answering this question: does organic food decrease children's health effects? The way we did that, we wanted to see if there is an association between an organic food diet and the body burden of pesticides in children. Also wanted to see if there is an association with the metals in urine of children, if there is an association between inflammation biomarkers, and also we wanted to see if organic diet is associated with oxidative damage biomarkers in children. So we performed this Organico study. As I said before, it was funded by the LIFE program in the Organico LIFE project. This was a cluster randomized crossover trial that had 2 periods. One period was a 40-day organic diet period, and the other period was a 40-day conventional period. The conventional period is where children were consuming their usual diet, while the organic diet period was a period where a certified restaurant was providing organic products to the children so that they would consume them during this 40-day trial. We performed the Organico study in 6 primary schools in Limassol, Cyprus, in January and April of 2017. The 6 schools were randomized into 2 groups. So 3 schools were randomized to group 1, where the children that were attending these schools followed first the organic diet, the 40-day organic diet, followed by a conventional diet, which, as I said before, is their usual diet, and group 2 followed the exact opposite treatment sequence. The inclusion criteria were healthy children that were between the ages of 10 to 12. These children would systematically consume conventional food, and this means that their weekly diet includes, let's say, more than 80% of conventional foods. And these children should reside in Cyprus at least the last 5 years. We obtained the necessary approvals from the Cyprus National Bioethics Committee and also from the Cyprus Ministry of Education and Culture. And we registered our trial through the clinicaltrials.gov. In our main analysis, we included 149 children. And to the best of our knowledge, this is the largest organic diet intervention trial to date. I'm not going to move on to methodology part because of lack of time. So moving on to the findings, you can see here about the association between organic diet and pesticides. And what we observed was that during this 40-day organic diet period, we saw a significant reduction in both biomarkers that we examined. And this is the urinary pyrethroid pesticide biomarker 3-PBA and the urinary non-nicotinoid pesticide biomarker 6-CN. Here you can see the results from the association we saw between organic diet and oxidative damage biomarkers. As oxidative damage biomarkers, we examined three biomarkers. So you can see here that our findings showed that during the 40-day organic diet period, we had significantly lower levels of the oxidative damage biomarker 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine biomarker, or else 8-OHDG. And we saw also a time-dependent reduction of 8-isoprostaglandin F2A, or else 8-isopgF2A, and also of the third oxidative damage biomarker, which is malondialdehyde, or else MDA. It was also important to see that two of these oxidative damage biomarkers, 8-OHDG and 8-isopgF2A, were linked to the one pesticide biomarker, the 3-PBA. About inflammation now, we wanted to see if organic diet was associated with inflammation, and we used the C-reactive protein as an inflammation biomarker. And we saw that during the 40-day organic diet period, there was a time-dependent reaction of CRP, and that this CRP was also linked again to the pyrethroid exposure biomarker, which is a 3-PBA. In another study, we tested how we examined, let's say, how the organic diet trial was associated with heavy metals in the urine of children. And the two heavy metals that we examined were lead and cadmium. And we saw that during the 40-day organic diet period, there was a time-dependent reduction of lead exposure. And also that all three oxidative damage biomarkers, 8-OHDG, 8-isopgF2A, and MDA, were linked to both heavy metals, lead and cadmium. Finishing up, these findings were also presented before, but just to get a recap, here it was this was a collaborative work. We only used the baseline samples of our study, and we wanted to see if there is an association between some pesticides and oxidative damage biomarkers. And what we saw was that the OADG was the oxidative damage biomarker, was positively associated with glyphosate's primary metabolite, AMPA, and also it was associated with the chlorpyrifos metabolite, TCPY. The other oxidative damage biomarker, 8-isopgF2A, was positively associated with the pyrethroid metabolite, CLF3CA. An important point of this study was that the median levels of 3-PBA and TCPY in the organic children were higher compared to other studies in other children populations, for example, in USA, Canada, Costa Rica, Spain, Italy, and Thailand. I would just like to mention here that our study was presented in one of the publications of the European Environment Agency. And what they actually reported is that our study demonstrated how an organic diet significantly reduces pesticide concentrations in children's body. And also it's associated with the significantly lower levels of oxidative stress. And another important thing is that switching from a conventional to an organic diet for children's meals in school was found to be cost effective. And this supports the broader implementation of this switching from a conventional to an organic diet for children's meals in schools in all Cyprus, the whole Cyprus. Lastly, I would like to close with a few policy recommendations based on these findings. In the short term, an idea would be to subsidize organic meals in schools, or at least a part of them, let's say fruits and vegetables. Another thing that was also mentioned before is the education part of the awareness that needs to be better improved in the short term. And here we could better educate teacher, parent, and students on how to reduce exposure to pesticides. And especially this can be done for critical time windows like pregnancy, infancy, and childhood. In the medium term, the policy recommendations would be to incentivize local organic food production and supply networks, and to integrate some organic diet metrics or pesticide biomonitoring into child health surveillance activities. In the long term now, some policies in the national level or the EU level could be implemented to reduce pesticide use from farm to fork and to support research on health outcomes that this time would be linked directly to reduced exposure to pesticides. Thank you for your attention. I would like to also thank my Clotho Lab colleagues and my supervisor, Dr. Macris, and my colleagues, Dr. Vangelis Charisiatis, Samuel Abibola. Also our collaborators from the Cyprus State General Laboratory, the Flemish Institute for Technological Research and the University of Antwerp, the German Environment Agency, the Emory University, and the Cyprus International Institute for Environmental and Public Health. And of course, last but not least, the Organico Study children and their families, because without them, the Organico Study would not be possible. Thank you.
Presentation, also keeping the time. The next presentation will be on balancing productivity and protection, sustainable agriculture, and the future of pesticide use, given by Dr. Menelaos Stavrinidis from the Department of Agriculture Sciences, Biotechnology and Food Science, Cyprus University of Technology.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you very much, Konstantinos, for the invitation to present some of the work we've been doing on this topic. And I would like to say that this is a very important event for Cyprus. And it's also very useful that we have different experts that provide complementary expertise on the topic, which is currently not available in all in Cyprus. Of course, I would like to add that my background is in agriculture, main agriculture, and what we have been doing in my lab is to try to move towards more sustainable agricultural practices, especially through the reduction of pest application, as well as other methods such as biological control, the work that was also presented by Lysandros. But I would like to make a small note here that the work of Konstantinos and his group was very important in raising awareness on this topic, on exposure and the potential effects of pesticides in Cyprus, as well as the more recent initiative by Nikos Middleton and Susanna Kileos on doing that workshop in pinpointing what are some of the main issues we need to address if we are to move forward on reducing pesticide use and exposure in Cyprus. Okay, I had some initial slides, brief intro, but I'm going to walk through them very fast. So we've been cultivating the land for 12,000 years now. It's been a while, but the interesting thing is that we have been using the main methods more or less for up to 150 to 200 years ago. What I mean is that agriculture has been for several millennia a low-intensive practice until the industrial advancements, which allowed the use of heavy machinery initially in agricultural operations. And that led to increasing the areas of crop cultivation. And subsequently, problems started to become bigger, more intense, because monocultures, growing large areas with crops, are prone to more pest problems, higher pest pressure, because you have large areas with the same crop at the similar phenological stage, at similar susceptibility. Of course, this has also been motivated by the Green Revolution, which initially provided, and it still provides, substantial increases in the productivity. These are new varieties that are higher producing than traditional varieties, but they're also more susceptible to pests, and to be grown, they require higher inputs of fertilizers, water, as well as pesticide products. Now, pesticides were the chemical revolution since the 40s and so on. Before that, we had a few substances that people were trying to use, not very effective against pests. Some were very toxic as well, but we didn't have the use in large areas as we do now. So since the chemical revolution, we have seen an increase in the use of pesticides. They became cheap. It was easier to apply using machinery, tractors, airplanes in some cases, that can spray large areas with the pesticide to prevent pests from damaging the crop. And I have a graph here of the that shows the consumption, the use of pesticides globally since the 90s. And you see that there's a huge increasing trend in the application of active ingredients. This is the pure chemical substance that does the work, that actually kills the pests, but it can also kill several other organisms, which are not the target of the application, and it can also result in health effects to humans. Now, there has been a huge increase. This is very concerning, of course. And if we take a look at what's going on in the European Union, there has been a more or less stable use of pesticides. This is sales in tons for the Union, and it's been around 350,000 to almost 400,000 tons per year for all member states. And then there has been a decrease in the last few years. In 2023, for instance, we had the lowest use compared to previous years, which shows that maybe some of the efforts at the European level had a positive impact in reducing pesticide use. It's not only that, there were many other issues, financial issues, the cost of production, and maybe it also led to the reduction in pesticide use. But what I would like to focus a bit more on is the case of Cyprus, which I think is a very concerning sample in pesticide use. Here I have some data that I analyzed a couple of years ago. The situation is not very different. which shows the use of pesticides per member state in kilograms of active ingredient per hectare. And you can see that in Cyprus, we are maybe 2 times above the average of the other member states, around 10 kilos of active ingredient per hectare. Now, this is slightly misleading in that, and I'm explaining this to give you a perspective in that in Cyprus, we use a lot of sulfur. Sulfur is a product that is used in vineyards, for instance, as dust. And they like to apply it for different reasons, mainly for disease control. Now, sulfur, it's not one of those very toxic chemicals in terms of exposure of humans, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but the reports we have now are not classifying sulfur as one of those highly toxic products. Still, if we take out sulfur, Cyprus is still the top in this list. So maybe it goes down by 60%, but we're still very, very high on the ranking. And the concerning issue about this is that farmers are applying high amounts of pesticides. I believe that they don't need all that they are using, and I will come back to this in my final slides. The other concerning issue is that all these products end up in the food that we're consuming. And if you look, this is related to this. This is in collaboration with the Department of Agriculture, which shows strawberries and different residues of pesticides that were detected in strawberries. If it's red, it means that chemical should not have been used. It's not authorized. So you have some cases with non-authorized use, but it's also concerning that there are cases of on average, it's 6 pesticides per sample. That's too much. You don't need all that. Some come from the same chemical company. So there's an overuse and an use that's not really needed. Now, if you look at the residues on the products that are in the Cyprus market, you see that again we're among the top. In 2023 we were top. That's the case if you go back 10 years, we're first, second, third. So this actually exemplifies the problem of the application of pesticides, the overuse of pesticides. And I'm going to finish with a few slides. Probably I don't have a concrete plan on how to move forward. I have some ideas, but I know that it's not easy to apply this. It's not just a university, a ministry. It cannot happen by expecting that a regulatory authority or a public department can do all this on its own. This requires collaboration from different sectors of the society. And I hope that this event will serve maybe as an initiative to start moving forward, because I think things can be done for the benefit both of the farmers as well as the consumers. Now, I think one of the most important issues is the accountability for pesticide use. Because if you're a farmer and if you're registered as a professional farmer, that means that you can go to any pesticide sales shop, you can buy any pesticide you believe is good for your crop, or somebody suggested, or maybe the shop has, the person at the shop has recommended it, and you spray it. Now, there's no registry where you can find what has been used in what amounts and why. And a step further, the issue is that if you are an agriculturist, so our students at the university, have the legal right to make recommendations to farmers, but recommendations are not legally binding. So a farmer can purchase what they need on their own, and an agriculturalist, an agronomist can recommend orally, verbally, and that's it. I think we need more accountability. So if I am to go visit a farmer and I represent a company, there has to be written prescription. Use this for this purpose. And at the same time, at the same time, we need to be able to track use at field level. Right now, we know the total amounts. We don't know where it's being used. So this is something we need to work on. I know there were initiatives in the past. Maybe they're not moving as fast as they would like them to. It's not an easy topic. Second part, organic farming. Maybe this is one of the positive aspects. Organic farming in Cyprus has been increasing. Now we're around 10% of the areas, a lot of olives, cereals, and so on. We also have vegetables, and this is also a driving force in the reduction of pesticides. Potentially, other forms of agriculture, like regenerative agriculture, sustainability schemes, which can help farmers to reduce pesticide use, because then you can market your product under a label as regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture, and there you have certification. I don't know why this does not. Okay. New technologies. We now can use satellite data to monitor pest infestations. We can use traps with artificial intelligence that help us monitor pests on a daily basis and recommend early measures if needed. And that this reduces the need for pesticide applications, lowers rates if needed, areas, smart sprayers that adjust the spraying in the areas that is really needed. You don't have to spray the whole crop. These are the traps we are now using in some of the plots that participate in this CEPERS, the Horizon Europe funded project. This is some of the data for the phenology of the crops, where we can see in which areas, which seasons the crops are more susceptible to infestation, then recommend to farmers when and what they can spray if they need to spray. And the last part, and I'm finishing, is that I feel that there has to be more initiative from the large retailers, because a lot of products that are being sold through these retailers, and there has to be a transparent policy on how the products we sell are being tested for residues, and whether we have our own requirements. There is at least one company that they have their own policy. It's published, and they go beyond the legislation. They limit the use of pesticides, the specific number, and so on. But there are others that are not, at least it's not clear, this policy. And I think that this can be a big driver in reducing pesticide use in farmers' field, which will result in lower exposure for the consumers. And thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Can we have the name of the company, please?
It's off the record. It's Lidl. You can find it though.
Maybe later you can. Okay, the last but not the least presentation is on the case studies from Cyprus on pesticides in foods. Will be given by Mr. Herodotos Herodou, Public Health Services, representing Dr. Elizabeth Constantinou, Director of Medical Services and Public Health Services, Cyprus Ministry of Health.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the previous speakers for their excellent presentation, the very interesting presentations. In my presentation, we are going to see control of the food for residues of pesticides, what we are doing in our services. I'm the head of the Public Health Services, which is under the Medical and Public Health Services of the Ministry of Health. And among our other works that we have to do, it's the control of the residues. So our role, first of all, I will explain about the role of the public health services. The public health services have the authority and obligation to carry out inspections regarding pesticide residues in and on foods. There is a close cooperation with the Department of Agriculture as concerns primary production. Cooperation is necessary so as to successfully cover the whole range from farm to fork. Whenever a sample is found after a laboratory analysis to be non-compliant or at critical limits, as concerns the maximum permitted residues of pesticides, the Department of Agriculture is duly informed so that the investigation may be continued to the field of production. The checks carried out by the public health services consist of receiving samples from the market, local and imported foods, and points of entry, import of foods. The samples are analyzed by the State General Laboratory, as well as inspecting whether the traceability of retail food business operators and packers of fruits and vegetables is adequate. Points of sampling cover the spectrum from packing centers to large and small retail outlets. All imported consignments of fruits and vegetables are checked at the point of entry, and where necessary, samples are taken for analysis. Pesticides analyzed, they cover the whole range, except where not applicable. As concerns imported products and certain other cases, the analysis also covers pesticides that are not approved for use in the European Union. Now, sampling programs. Public Health Services cooperates with its Standard J Laboratory to prepare an annual program of food sampling for pesticide residues. Besides the programming, there are other checks that we do without programming, without anyone knowing that we are going to do it. There are surprise checks for, so that nobody knows when and how we are going to sample for pesticide residues. Separate from the annual program, additional samples may be taken following emergencies, complaints, or any circumstances giving rise to reasonable suspicion. One of these is what have been mentioned before for retail premises, that they are doing their own controls, and those retail that they are doing their own controls inform us that they have found pesticide use in such and such, and then we go back, we inform the Department of Agriculture and take samples and necessary measures. The annual program now is based on a risk assessment carried out at the end of the previous year. The Public Health Services and the State General Laboratory operate for this purpose. Many factors are taken into account for the risk assessment. Among others, these include the quantity of the product on the Cyprus market and the range of distribution, the exposure of children and other vulnerable groups, new product categories and or new methods of production, results from previous years, non-compliant samples and samples that the critical limits may be targeted for the next year, directions from the European Commission to all EU member states to target specific common foods, any information received from the Department of Agriculture regarding incidents of non-compliant use of pesticides or suspicion of non-compliant use, any relevant information concerning safety or volume of production received from other organizations, such as the police, agricultural union, the European Food Safety Authority, and the Rapid Alert System for Food and Feed. Now, let's see samples that were taken in last year for pesticide residues. The total samples that were taken are 372, of which 307 or 83% were compliant. We have 31 samples non-compliant, which is 8% of the samples, and 34 are critical limits, which is about 9% of the sample. I think everybody knows what is the MRL. Anyhow, let me just read it. MRL is the maximum residue level. It means the upper legal level of a concentration of a pesticide residue in or on food or feed, set in accordance with the regulation, the European regulation of 396 of 2005, based on good agricultural practice and the lowest consumer exposure necessary to protect vulnerable consumers. Critical limits close to the MRL, but not above. The sample is legally considered as compliant. Let's see now the samples that were not compliant. The 31 non-compliant samples involve 18 different food types. Vine leaves, celery, grapes, tomatoes, spinach, cabbage, raisins, lemons, peach, cherries, rice, etc., and etc., which actually shows that the pesticides are used for all over the foodstuffs that are mentioned here. 66% of the non-compliant products were produced in Cyprus, and 6% in other EU member states, and 28% in non-EU countries. Non-compliant vine leaves involve both Cyprus product and imported. We should say that the 5 non-compliant celery products were produced in Cyprus and taken in the first half of the year. We repeated the samples taken in the second half, and they were compliant. And this, we should thank our colleagues from the Department of Agriculture that have visited the producers and give their give their feedback. The results of the vine leaves, grapes, and celery indicate a generally unsatisfactory level of compliance. These food categories have been targeted for this year program. And it is noted that the vine leaves imported to Cyprus in last year that did not comply with MRL for pesticides were from Egypt. We should mention that the vine leaves from Egypt are included in Commission's implementing regulation of 2019-1793, which requires that at least 50% of such consignments should be tested for pesticide residues. In Cyprus, we apply 100%, and not only vine leaves from Egypt, but also other foodstuffs that are mentioned in this regulation. Now, what happens when a sample is not compliant? If an analysis indicates that the example is at critical limits, and we have explained before what the critical limits are, the sample is regarded compliant, but the producer and seller are warned in writing in order to be careful. And the Department of Agriculture is also notified. If the sample now is not compliant, i.e. a pesticide residue is above the MRL, the producer reporter is informed in writing, as also the seller and any other middleman, and the Department of Agriculture is also notified. A fine is imposed to the producer, and in certain cases, also to the seller and the middleman, depending on the case. All persons involved are ordered to withdraw the involved batch of the product from the market, and where applicable, a public announcement is issued for the product is still on the market. As you know, we have the withdrawal from the market as a weapon, but also if the foodstuff is on the final consumer, then we have the recall of the foodstuff from the consumer. Now, the producer and middlemen are ordered to destroy any stock of the involved batch under their control, including the quantities withdrawn from retail outlets that they had supplied. In the meantime, all quantities are officially guaranteed. All care is taken so that the sample is correctly tracked back to the producer. Written statements are taken by all persons involved from the sale of the product, including middlemen, and back to the producer. Where applicable, the European Commission and the EU member states are informed about the non-compliant samples found in Cyprus via the rapid alert system of food and feed, so-called RAS. If the foodstuff originates from a country outside the EU, the country is informed via InfoSan. It's a global network of national food safety authorities managed jointly by the FAO and WHO. And we should also mention that every year, all the work that is being done, all the samples that are taken, all the non-compliant are reported back to the Commission according to the regulations, and the Commission can see what's happening throughout the EU countries and make amendments to the regulation of 1793 so that to target other third countries if they see that they have a lot of foodstuffs on the market with pesticide residues. Now, non-compliant samples not necessarily mean a risk to consumers. It's compliant results checked against the health-based guidance values issued by the European Food Safety Authority. This value is a benchmark used to assess the safety of pesticide residues in food. It represents the maximum amount of substance that can be consumed daily or over a lifetime without posing a significant risk to health. These HBGVs consider current safety data and uncertainties in this data and the likely duration of the consumption. These help regulatory authorities determine the permissible level of pesticide residues in food, ensuring that even if these levels are exceeded, there is still a margin of safety before reaching a level that could pose a health risk. With this, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now we have 2 moments for questions, please.
Hello. I have a question to this last presentation because we just recently made this Pesticide Action Network Europe and April test, and we not only evaluated the MRLs, but we also evaluated the presence of substances what we believe there could be like problematic, like PFAS pesticides, like candidate for substitution pesticides, and we also try to analyze the amount of multi-residues as a problem. So I don't know if it maybe would work to do it on national level to kind of do such evaluation that what other problems you can identify. So what substances, like candidate for substitution substances, which are supposed to be phased out sooner or later, like problematic pesticide, how they are present in the samples and how if there could be any program to reduce such pesticides.
the program of releasing these pesticides is up to the Department of Agriculture. What we are actually doing is controlling what is on the market, and then we
Come closer to the microphone for the.
sorry. Okay. So actually what we are doing is controlling the pesticide use in foodstuffs in the market, and then by controlling we inform the Department of Agriculture, who are actually on the field and taking the precautionary measures so that we will not find again the same problem in the market. Dominique, that answers your question.
Please, next question.
Yeah, so we are looking substance, like individual substances, and not, we're not looking like if one sample has 5 samples of substances,
yes.
and what could be the cumulative exposure.
Yes. All the
Yeah.
pesticides, the multi-pharmacia, everything is tested by the State General Laboratory and give us the.
Yeah. Yeah, but the safety values that you refer to is based on individual substances.
Not on common.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I have another question. How long does it take? Okay, so you detect that a sample is it exceeds, is non-compliant, let's say. How long does it take to go to report it, so the producer knows it, and then the product comes out from the market? How long? What's the time frame?
Well, at first,
ideally.
yeah, there is an ideal timing, because it takes some time for the laboratory to do and then give us feedback. We have the feedback by email or phone before even sending back the actual report, so that we can move forward to the Department of Agriculture, and we try to take foodstuffs from the market. Of course, this is not always the case, and this happens in all over the world until we have the report, until we take samples. Some of the foodstuffs have already been consumed.
Democratic distribution. Yes. Last question. If not, thank again all the speakers and also the audience. And let's continue with the 5th panel. Thank you.
Move out. I think everybody should move out to the table.
Yes.
Yes, here. You stand here.
Will he come closer to the microphone?
Yes.
Is it there?
You'll be further away, you have to speak louder.
Or the microphone?
Here. Here.
You don't have everybody here, no?
We do, yes.
Athenis from Leona Funded.
Athenis, for some reason, I don't see her.
Okay, then thank you, everybody. And I'm Gergely Simon from Pan Europe, and I'm chairing the last panel. And thank for all of you for staying for until the last panel. So what we will discuss that what we have learned today, basically from the meeting, and we will discuss how we can react and how we can what answers we can have to all these problems. So I thank you again, Mr. My Greek pronunciation names maybe won't be that good, but Mr. Herbutu from representing the ministry, Angeliki Lihimatou from Pesticide Action Network, Professor Makris hosting our event and from the Cyprus University, and we have Mr. Spirou here. Yes, thanks very much for coming here from the Agriculture Sciences. So basically, my first question is that we have learned today from the
Mr. Simon, do we have somebody in the audience from the beekeepers society or the organic farmers? No.
Well, we still have only like perhaps half an hour to discuss these topics. Okay, then please, maybe you can answer also to some of the questions what we are I'm raising. So you would be welcome to react on it during the discussion. So first, we learned that basically children are exposed to pesticide. They cannot avoid it. From house dust, they are exposed to biocides and pesticides from the food, the everyday product. And do you think, what do you consider needed to improve children's exposure, how we can reduce it, and what do you think are the main obstacles, the regulatory gaps in the current pesticide use practices and legislation, which is basically an obstacle of protecting the vulnerable groups, especially like children. And I think the best would be if you start from the other side now.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. I am representing the Union of Agriculture Scientists. We had a very good presentation today, and we have learned a lot. From my point of view, I would like to say, yes, I have children. I'll try to, I don't like my children to, let's say, eat food or vegetables with plant protection products be above the MRLs. I don't like the water that I drink to have plant protection products in, but on the other hand, because I am a crop protection advisor, I am close to the grower, to the farmers, and I know how difficult it is for them to produce with the climate that we have in Cyprus. We have a very high temperature, we have a lot of pests in Cyprus, or the majority of the farmers are not well-educated people that they need our support all the time. So for me, it's very important to educate these people and also to educate the agriculturists, the crop protection advisors that are going to be next to them. I wish that it was so easy to ban all the pest protection products, but that's not the case. It's not so easy. We have to be very careful because let's say that many people die from car accidents, but we cannot stop driving. Even in advanced countries that they have these buses and trains, we still need to use the car. But the same applies to the plant protection products. We have to be very careful to make food more safe for us, for our children, but at the same time to be accessible by the farmers, to use it right, to use it with the label, and to be able to offer as plant protection advisors solutions to the growers. Because if we are not able to provide solutions to them, then, especially in Cyprus, it will be very easy for them to use products that are not allowed in EU. If they don't have the solution, it's the only thing that they can't think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herodo. Do you see others than technical solutions? Or
Yes, I would agree with my colleague here that education is very important, but also collaboration between all the stakeholders and listen to the scientific society. As we have seen from the presentation, we saw that farming without the use of pesticides, how they help the children's pesticides in their body, in their urine. We can see again from the scientists that what is the right time to use pesticides, how and when to use them, and what pesticides have to be used, and this it's education. If the scientists communicate and collaborate with the services and all together go to the farmers and explain things, then I think we'll be in a better position, as well as for our side to continue the control and take all the necessary actions that are needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Marquez.
Yes, I would like to start by saying that we need a multifaceted approach. Farm to fork is a good systemic based thinking to apply in this case, because the obvious answer, everybody wants to reduce pesticide exposure, especially for children. The big and 1 million euros question is how to do it and how effective whatever we propose will be in the end. Especially for countries like Cyprus, that we saw that historically the exposures to pesticides are higher than other European member states. So obviously, for the last 10 years, 20 years, Cyprus, I think, is living up to study pesticide exposures. One, to understand, let's say, better the health effects of them. But on the other hand, what's more important, I think, is we should not wait for the epidemiological evidence to surface, but instead we need to apply actionable solutions to try to reduce them, as I mentioned before, with a multifaceted approach at the policy level, trying to see what we can do to reduce exposures in the farm, how we can do better controls, how we can inform all the stakeholders, especially parents, all the stakeholders, not only parents, and to do this in a systematic fashion, to do this in a strategic implementation plan, that obviously we need the government to take over and allow us from the academia to do this work in the field, because the government cannot do this alone. So they need to ask universities to do the job and try to bring together everyone in a systematic fashion. I mean, just once a year, yeah, we get together, we drink some coffee, we see each other, we ask for our children, how are they going? we tap on our shoulder saying, oh, what a nice work, and that's it. But if we really want to help the society, help the people and protect better protect our vulnerable populations, then we need something else, something we haven't seen so far. And I ask for your cooperation, your continuous engagement to make some good teams, because this is not one man's show, it's not one woman's show. It's a societal problem. So every family, every person has a saying to this. Every stakeholder has a saying to it. The government has a saying to it, and we need to unite our voices, have debates. I really like today's debate in the morning, between the European Commission and you. I think we need more of those. And we need more events like this by bringing more people that don't know anything, because everybody here knows about pesticides. But we need to talk to people that don't know or they don't appreciate the facts about pesticides. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I agree with that we need to take action, and I agree that we need to follow what science is telling us. But what we've seen from the work that we're doing, we've seen that there is a lot of misinformation. We hear a lot that we need to feed the world, or about food security, blocking the decisions. Where, on the other hand, we do see farmers that they have successfully managed to reduce the use of pesticides or completely eliminate. And we've seen this now. Like, I was very happy to hear that there is this promotion of using pheromones or resistant varieties. So finding actual solutions that you won't be susceptible to pests. So you won't need pesticides, and you can do without any cost, additional cost. So definitely the advisory systems, we need to develop more this, like train the trainers we heard, but education, bring like the knowledge that we have collected from different fields and share this knowledge. I know that farmers, they work together. So we know that farmers that they are organic or IPM is integrated pest management. They create hubs where they exchange information and they say, I have this pest, what did you do? And they have a WhatsApp. Oh, I used, so they try different things and they are developing new ideas. So we need more of this, but we need, of course, what we insist is to keep them independent, because it's true that if someone has a market interest on a specific product and comes in and says, oh, I want to sell you this product that is really good, then it destroys this scientific integrity where you try to find a solution to a problem because you want to have some, reduce the use of pesticides, not extend, perpetuate, let's say, this dependence that we have on pesticides. So yes, I would say this advisory or knowledge hubs, let's call them different things, and of course supported by research.
As I see, you have a bit different view how to tackle reduce the risks, but we know for almost 1.5 decades we have the so-called sustainable use of pesticide directive, which provides a lot of tools for member states how to reduce that dependency on pesticides and better protect children and other vulnerable groups. I would like to ask all of you that in your view, what extent are these existing obligations are being implemented in practice, like mandatory application of integrated pest management, enforcement of buffer zones, or prioritization of to non-chemical alternatives? So please, again, I would like to hear your views on this.
The farmers are trying to follow the label, and they manage to follow the label in a big percentage, but this is not always the case. I cannot speak for other countries, but for Cyprus, it's difficult to, let's say, leave a buffer zone to the next field when you you have a very close border with the next field. Also, if you read the label of a plant protection, pest saves, avoid spraying when you have running water next to your field. We are in Cyprus. The label is made by another member state, and it is copied as it is in Cyprus. So we don't have a lot of rain, as you probably know. We don't see rivers floating next to our fields. So this is not very applicable. We need to be more, see the cases. We must be more, how can I say? Specific to the climate of Cyprus, to the microclimate of every area. I know this is very difficult, it's not possible, but this is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Well, this is not to our services competency, but I will agree with my colleague here about the Cyprus situation, which sometimes had to be seen case by case and how to move forward.
Well, this is very concerning. No, because it's true that we see from at the European level, the integrated pest management practices have not been implemented. Many times it results in the contamination of water resources. We hear from, as I said earlier, from European Environment Agency that pesticides infiltrate into groundwater, and this means that they will stay there for years. And it takes some years to reach the underground water. I'm very concerned when I hear that we just need to use these toxic chemicals more carefully, rather than say, yes, we need to prioritize in finding ways of not using them. So this is what I would have liked to hear.
Can I make a comment?
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's why we are here.
You mentioned before that there are cases that growers have managed to produce fruit or vegetables without the use of any pesticides. This survey, this case was in Cyprus, or it was in another country?
In different countries. We also heard that there is an uptake of organic agriculture, for example, or biodynamic. We call it different. Of course, here I wanna highlight that all of this to be done, it's important that there is support, and I talk about financial support. That's why these eco schemes, now that they are being voluntary, but they are very important to be triggered. I heard there was a national action plan in Cyprus. So all of this is it's an opportunity to use them to support these farmers that they are interested in making this change, because it would take years. We heard that I think a land to be used for organic, it takes 3 years.
Yes.
That it has to stay without pesticides. And we don't need to go directly into organic, where we have to discuss what's the obstacles there. But even the reductions should be compensated, rewarded. It's good. Yeah, to be rewarded. So, because right now we see that the situation is the opposite. It's like the very big farms that they're using very intensive agriculture still get subsidies, where smaller farms that they have less impact, they don't. It's so we have to find the reverse. It definitely needs systemic change, and I think this is why it's so important to have this conversation.
So, do you know if they don't use pesticides, what measures, what controls they use to be able to control the pests and the diseases they have.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's case by case. You have to look at the crop, the climate, the combination, and there is the creating.
And the risk.
The risk, yeah. Risk.
Please comment on it, and also from organic agriculture. Just please come a bit closer if you or speak up loud.
Yeah, I will speak louder. What is the percentage of this organic farming? I mean, even in Europe, we have an idea.
Sorry, it's not organic farming. Please. Organic farming, you are allowed to use some plant protection products that are allowed in plant protection.
Okay, non-pesticide farming.
It's getting more and more.
Yeah, I mean, an idea about is 10%, 20%, 80%, for example.
I think it's really growing, including in Cyprus. But exactly what you said, Professor, is the money is only going to the big farmers. Okay, so they can have the pesticide or whatever. When it's going to smaller, but actually there are big farms using no pesticide. It's a balance. It's not 3 years to get rid of it. You need a minimum 5 years to be totally sustainable. But it's a combination. You cannot do the unique planting. You know, you have to combine, and then the biosystem is taking over. So the nature is making by itself, and everybody is beneficial. But those kind of people doing this, it's only by their own. They don't have any money coming in. They're not recognized, and it looks like they even stopped to do this. Okay, so the other ones are continuing to receive their fundings and whatever, and those ones who want, but they're becoming more and more because they see the change on the health of their children, of their own health. A lot of people who had cancer, whatever, from the schools or whatever, went into this farming because they had enough, or the cruelty towards animals, and it's working very well. So it looks like it's just a decision by the government. That's it. Okay, where the funding is going, and there is a way to find a kind of solution, especially in Cyprus. We are a small island, and we are still able to manage it if we don't want to go into this global thing and everybody gets ill and we have all to go to the medicine and take the medicine, which is beneficial as well for this industry. So it's a choice of what we want. If we want to be free and to live healthy in this island, it's still small, we still can do it. So it's a matter of our choice. What everybody can do, raising just your hand to your neighbors, you know, to your people around you, and just trying to help around you, and we can do it. And it's very easy to do if we are just all together for the same aim, which is our health and our happiness. Because all those depression and everything coming in, it's also because of the food, and we know this. I mean, all the science, the studies have shown, being in psychology, in medicine, in environment. Ask all the psychiatrists, they don't have any room anymore for children and new patients. Everybody is going cuckoo, you know, with what's going on. So we just have to wake up and be together. Doesn't matter if you choose something which is not with the beliefs of your neighbor or your beliefs or whatever. Let's start again and be together and start a new world, you know, where we can really be together and be everybody happy instead of having one small elite above, you know, receiving all the money and thinking they are above. At one point, they will realize that everybody hates them and they will be alone on the pedestal, you know. So no, we have to live together, you know, there is no other choice.
Thank you. So please some quick reactions and questions, so then we can continue.
Maybe just
please keep up.
Yes, because it's not clear to me this application of no pesticide use at all. Is this something that is funded as a measure by the EU, or we're talking about some farmers not using?
And when I say no pesticides, I think I mostly refer to synthetic pesticides. Okay. So I don't go into, like, for example, of course you can use pheromones or some biological control or biological based or natural pesticides.
And we include organic agriculture in this
yes,
definition? they do use some natural, which can be harmful. But
yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, we don't want. I mean, not everybody can. We understand that not everybody can become organic tomorrow. You know, this is a system. I think you said it started from the 40s, 50s with the Green Revolution, and we are all our production system, supermarkets, food. Its food consumption is dependent on this system. So we need to do. We need a system approach. There's also take into account that a lot of food goes to waste. I think it's like 40% of food waste. And some people will argue also that we're making some people fatter. You know, it's not like we're not feeding the world. It's not for that. This is all of this is like narratives that they have produced by the industry itself to scare people. Even the food security, we saw it with Ukraine war. You know, there was a food security, and then suddenly all the discussions we were having sustainable agriculture stopped for a while. And of course, this is a serious problem. We're talking about the future. We're talking about food security. We're talking about fertility of land. You know? So it's really important to reduce chemical input.
Yes, please. Question.
Is there time for a brief comment there and question? I heard the lady here say it's our choice. So my question is, who is we, right? Because all I'm hearing is responsibility, and who's responsible? When we have so many groups that are involved in the system, right? And this is about behavior, but it's not about behavior of one person, it's about the behavior of everybody together that creates a behavior of the system. So we hear about examples and what happens abroad and what happens or doesn't happen in Cyprus. So what I'm hearing here is contextualization. I've heard the gentleman there say the label comes from elsewhere. We heard earlier, what are the epidemiological studies from Cyprus? Well, if you ask me, we don't need epidemiological studies from Cyprus because the epidemiology is out there. So that is the one thing that will not change. The health effects of Cypriot children, of the Cypriot population will not be any different from any other population out there. The health effects will be the same. What would be different is contextualization of how to do it in Cyprus, how to take action. How do you change a label? What exactly which methods, alternative methods are appropriate in Cyprus? Who is there supporting the farmer on the ground? We heard it many times in pilot programs, but how do you scale them up? And is there the capacity to do it? So my question is responsibility. Who's responsible for this contextualization? Who's responsible to produce this local evidence of what works on the ground? And who's responsible for scaling it up?
Okay. Thank you. So I think we're kind of running out of our time. So I try to ask a final question where I try to reflect on both of these things, because we know that both the farm to fork strategy, both the biodiversity strategy called for a pesticide use reduction in Europe. So we see that we are using just too much. And we have heard that possibly organic farming and pesticide reduction don't get enough funding and support maybe in Cyprus. So there are some voices like that. So I would like to ask all of you that how do you see who are the key players or who can be responsible for not having pesticide reduction, or how we can achieve that, how we can achieve more support, more funding for pesticide use reduction and for organic farming. And suppose if you would have a final comment, then do you think this new deregulation or simplification of regulation would help this whole process or would go against? So please, a final round. Yes, please start.
Okay. For sure, I think the main player is the European Union, the committee who will change the procedures of giving authorizations to active ingredients and also the pesticides. We need safer active ingredients, and we have seen this in the past years that many toxic, active ingredients that were harmful for people and the environment, they were withdrawn. But also, because I am in the regulatory affair of a company, I also deal every day with this bureaucracy of pesticides. So we need to make the procedure more quick let's say, of the first presentation, we saw that for authorization it takes 5 to 10 years. Then also there are some startup companies that they use biocontrols, but even in those cases, to apply for a new active ingredient in a European level cost a lot of hundreds of thousands of euros. So it's not an easy task for a startup company to find all this money to pay and wait 10 years to get one active ingredient permitted and then to start commercializing the product. Also, for sure, the Department of Agriculture for this funding to the consumers, to the organic farms. And I have to say that the Department of Agriculture did some serious job. That's why we saw the increasement of organic farmers in the last years, and also the society.
Good that if you see an increase. Yeah.
Yes. So just the last comment. There is a question that, okay, are we okay? We are willing to take a tomato, for example, buy a tomato which have a symptom of a tuta absoluta, of an insect. If you go to the supermarket and see a lettuce that is being eaten by a worm, is the average person be okay to buy this product?
The question of the vegetables and fruits. If they make advertising now, right? Buy my ugly vegetables and fruits. Now organic.
Yes, but now insects are in our food, so we are going to get proteins.
Mr. Helder? Yes, as far as our services is concerned and our competencies, maybe continue the control or increasing the control may be one small care for the reduction of the use of pesticides.
Difficult question also. I don't think though we are here to solve the problem, but in any case, just offer our 2 cents and see how we can move forward with this. So I would like to put this into perspective in the sense that, you know, we are in 2026 and supposedly we move to this green transition era and this decarbonization era that the European Union is aspiring to. Supposedly we have to move also to a sustainable development and sustainable societies era. And to do this, we need to learn from our mistakes first. Secondly, to apply maybe new solutions to, especially, I come back to the issue of reducing exposures by characterizing better, for example, people's exposures. Just like we do biochemical analysis for cholesterol, I think it should be equally expensive, equally cheap, to measure systematically, periodically your exposure to pesticides as a means to make people educated about it, aware of, and be able to, for the time being, until the public gets sensitive enough to push the governments to do something, nothing will happen more than what is happening now. That's my personal opinion. So until, and if we reach that level as a gradual consequence of educating people, empowering people by giving them new technologies, new tools to monitor their exposures, I think we will not make much progress. So I would like to see more of these new tools, new technologies to measure people's not only exposure to pesticides, it can be also to other things.
Thank you.
Yes, very certainly to to phase out, as we say, the use of synthetic pesticides. It has to be, as it has been said, it has to come from different sides. So we definitely need the support from the government, okay, the European Commission, but also member states can act independently. They don't need to wait for the European Commission, although we in Brussels are trying to convince the European Commission to help on this. But then I like what he said, Costantino, about the increased monitoring, increased awareness. So it comes also from the citizens with policy pressure. And in your last question, I really we really raise our alarms that this to increase the availability of biological control in agriculture. Now they also deregulating the control of synthetic pesticides. So at the end, it will have the opposite effect. So we will have it will take even longer to pick up the biological control. So I don't have any, I mean, I understand the frustration that if you have like a biological control substance, it has to go through the same exactly procedure as if you have a very toxic substance, and maybe you will have a different procedure, and we support this, but we don't see why you cannot just focus now on biocontrol and then stop there. And you have to open up also these, to make this authorization of pesticides indefinite. So the deregulation is actually taking us backwards. So it's actually gonna, as we said, like it's gonna stop the bioavailability of biocontrol. Availability of biocontrol.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, this is as a last remark.
Thanks a lot. We used our time. We didn't solve, of course, all the problems of pesticide reduction possibilities, but I think we heard a lot of different views and hope we can, move forward with all this information. And I would like to give back the floor to Professor Makris for closing the conference.
Well, thank you all for being here with us until the end. Also, our attendees on Zoom for being with us also until that late hour before lunch. I would like to thank everybody for being with us. As I mentioned, our speakers, our delegates, our organizers that allowed us to make this possible. Hopefully, this is something that we will continue with your help, and keep up the good work, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.